welcome back to the IMNerd Podcast, guys. I'm your host, Freeway, and I'm here with my co-host, Kenny. And we also have a master and a pupil and a returning guest friend to the podcast, Kenny's cousin, Stango, Stang God, the person I've been doing the master and the pupil series with, so you guys are probably familiar with him by now. This is going to be our 2023 Edison format update because a lot has actually changed. And believe it or not, there was a period in 2022 where I thought that Edison format was kind of solved and a little bit stale. Just because all of the tournaments were basically just overrun by Blackwings, and as good as the Blackwing deck is, and as good as Edison format is, the format would die if everyone just started playing Blackwings, or if like they literally
if it became Blackwing format.
Yes, it would not be fun. Because one of the allures of Edison format, right, is the fact that there are so many decks to play theoretically. I say theoretically because I actually don't believe there are that many decks to play anymore. But, you know, people can get away with trying to play their X-Saber deck or their Dragon Turbo or their fucking GBs and stuff like that.
Draw your one-of cat deck.
Your cat, summon cat good. Like you can try to get away with anything you want in Edison format. And the cool part about the format is that you will actually win games or even matches with any deck. Like it's possible, no matter what you're playing. Like I've lost to literally everything over the course of the last year. I talk so much shit on a lot of decks. Like I talk shit on Glad Beast, I talk shit on Dandy Warrior, like playing Quick Draw because I think that card's awful. I talk shit on Dragon Turbo. I talk shit on Value Turbo. Like I talk shit on a lot of different decks. And oftentimes what ends up happening is eventually I have to pay the piper. You know, eventually my chickens come home to roost, and I'll play against that one Dragon Turbo guy at locals who just plays that deck every single week and never gives up on it and pretty much wins one round per week.
What's fucked up about you playing against it at locals is I'm pretty sure you're the one that showed them the deck.
Yes, like, I was the first person to go to locals with Dragon Turbo. Like no,
so you only have yourself to blame.
But now there's a terrorist at locals who plays only that deck, and like most of the time he just loses and goes about his day. But sometimes he draws Future Fusion every game, and it's like, well, I guess I just gotta hold that. Like I guess I just gotta hold that. But yeah,
some people like playing the lottery.
Some people, and that's the thing I always tell them, like if you're gonna draw like that, you might as well just go play the fucking Mega Millions. I think the Mega Millions is at
over $1 billion.
Yes.
Yep.
So you know what? I think that we just all actually need to play it because I'm trying to be rich. I'm trying to be like rich. Like
if you get $1 billion, you could give, if not $1 million, probably $1 million, right? But if not $1 million, you could give 500,000. You could give $500,000 to like every person you know and still be fine.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
If I
mean, the government's going to tax fuck you first, but you'll have several $100 million by the end of it.
Yes, I would give all of my friends. I'm not giving every person I know, but I would give.
Good question to ask. Would you guys take the like perpetuity payment, or you would take the bulk?
I would take.
I'm taking the bulk.
Yeah,
I'm taking the bulk.
So I think you're kind of slow if you take the annuity, is what it's called, because tomorrow's not promised. And I'm also here for a good time, not a long time. So I'm immediately, and it's funny, I just talked about this in my group chat. I'm immediately getting strippers and cocaine. Like immediately frame one, I'm getting strippers, whores, and cocaine insta. And like I've never done cocaine in my life. I've never done like any hard drugs in my entire life. Like literally nothing, right? But the like frame one of me getting $1 billion lottery ticket, I'm just whores and cocaine insta.
I'll tell you what, the first thing I'm doing, I'm just going to buy a house cash immediately. Mm-hmm. That way, like, because like people know where you live, and they're going to hear you want $1 billion. So I'm insta buying a house cash so I can get away so people can't rob me. Yeah, that's the first thing I'm doing. I don't want to get robbed.
Hey, Kenny, remember in high school when I lent you a pencil?
Yeah, listen.
Remember that?
All right. I still have enemies out there. There's still people that curse my name.
You know what? You know, some of my favorite memes are the ones that are like, if I won the Mega Millions, I wouldn't tell anyone, but there will be hints. And it'll be like it'll be like a person driving a Honda, but the inside of a Honda is just a Bentley's interior. Like it'll just be like the interior of a fucking Bentley, but the outside is a Honda, and it's like, but there would be hints.
Yo, yesterday I went shopping, and then I was with my mom, and she bought a lottery ticket, the Mega Millions, and then she bought one for my grandmom. I think my grandmom wanted like 2 tickets or whatever.
Sure.
And my uncle was over there, and so my mom was like, "Do you want me to get you a ticket?" And he was like, "Don't get me a ticket." He was like, "That kind of money will ruin your life."
Oh my god! What a pure soul.
That's a very Uncle Tom thing to say.
Bless his heart.
Oh,
bless
man.
his
He's
little
like,
heart.
that money will ruin your life.
Bless his heart.
For anyone who's listening, just to let you know, if you think your uncle is cool, I'm sorry. There's a cooler uncle in this world.
There is a cooler uncle.
There's no one who can top our uncle. Our uncle is
He's
the man.
First of all, your uncle's name is actually Uncle Tom, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can't deal with this. I can't deal with the two Caucasians on this call having a fucking actual Uncle Tom is so wild to me.
Listen. I'll never forget. For those of you listening, Anthony, who's been on here a bunch of times, good friend of ours. He's a beautiful black man. This is relevant to the story. I was at Ant's house one time. This is when he lived with his mom, and we're in the basement hanging out, and we're having a conversation. And me and Ant are talking about my Uncle Tom, and I keep referring to him as Uncle Tom. And then his mom looks at me with hatred in her heart. His mom looks at me like, what the fuck are y'all talking about?
Yeah, right.
Like, what's happening? And then Ant had to like explain, like, no, listen, he actually has an uncle named Tom. Like, it's just the way it worked out.
That is so wild.
Good time.
Okay, so I guess we should at some point get back to the topic at hand. We love rants.
Allegedly.
If you listen to this podcast, you know we love going off on a tangent. We love entertaining you guys with stories of our actual lives or just random things. But I guess we are here to talk about the changes that have happened with Edison format over the last couple of months, because the game, it's so weird how a format that doesn't have any new cards, like nothing new can be added to Edison, nothing can be taken away. It's a format that has a specific card pool, and it will stay like that forever unless someday the entire community agrees that we need to ban like Trap Dust Shoot and Future Fusion, stuff like that. But
Edison needs a Smoggin.
It does need a Smoggin, but you know what? I'm happy where it's at right now. It's actually interesting because Carpath was putting out videos in the last couple of weeks about how, like cards that should be banned in Edison format are limited to one. It's basically a wish list, because I think I agree with him when he says this will never really happen. I don't think you can get people on board to actually make a new format, because at that point you're just making your own format. And I don't know if Yu-Gi-Oh was there yet, because we just got to the point where we're accepting old formats, right?
Yeah.
We just got there. It took 20 fucking years for us to get to the point. Yeah.
The big thing with that is, like I said, Edison needs its own Smoggin, but I'm gonna errata that, because the thing about Smoggin is that it is a format completely independent of Nintendo.
Yeah.
And it just works all on its own. It's supported completely in-house. The big thing about Edison and Yu-Gi-Oh is that a big thing we were gunning for was it to be supported by Konami, and it is supported by Konami. Yes. Edison format is officially supported by Konami. So creating a community Edison format wouldn't really work, because then that's not supported by Konami. So now we're back at square one. Create this weird situation where like all of the real players are playing this community format, but then you got to play a different format when you play Konami events. Yep. So anyway, the point is if at some point through talks with Konami, if they want to go a little bit further, we get more grease in the wheels to do more stuff, that'd be really cool. But a completely community run without Konami Edison style reformat wouldn't. I don't think it's healthy for what we currently have going.
Yeah, I don't want to like anger the company or anything like that and be at odds with them. And then you have the community with the custom Edison format going against the actual Edison format people and all that stuff. That's just too complicated.
So I'll actually interject here. Normally I would actually be on the side where, like, if we can all come to a consensus of, what we decide needs to be changed and everything like that. Like, I'm normally on that side, but
same, like for Melee.
Yeah, in this situation, I actually don't agree. I think I like keeping Edison format the way it is, because the main thing for me that's especially appealing, because like I'm a brand new like physical paper like playing of Yu-Gi-Oh. I played only Yu-Gi-Oh online for the last like 2.5 years.
You just started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Period, like 3 years ago. Like literally Yu-Gi-Oh! In like at all. You're a new Yu-Gi-Oh! Player still. You're basically 3 years into the game.
And I think one thing for me, because I do dabble a little bit with Modern, playing on like Dueling Book and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And one thing to me that's like the biggest barrier of entry, because I thought about like, all right, I might get into like Modern, like at least go to locals. I may not like, I'm going to travel YCSs. Like I'll go to regionals near me and I'll go to locals. The barrier entry to costs, because you have to just get so many new cards so frequently. And if things start getting changed around in Edison and stuff like that, like that's a big deterrent for me personally.
Right.
Like getting a brand new smack dab new player into Yu-Gi-Oh! First off, it's ruling nightmares. The game is incredibly complex to understand, even in a simple format like this.
I love hearing you talk about this because you have a perspective that like no one else really has.
Right. I mean, I read Thunder King Ryo, and he doesn't negate special summons. That's just what I'm coming back to that. I talked about this already, but Thunder King Ryo does not negate special summons. Don't let anyone trick you. Don't let anyone try to explain it. They're all laughing because they tried to have this argument with me, and they were like, well.
So the scenario is Thunder King Ryo attacks into a Gores, and Stango, who's relatively new to Yu-Gi-Oh, at some point it decides that he wants to, negate Gores because it says special summon. Thunder King says negate the special summon. Why can't I do it? Oh, because it's an effect. All right, cool. Gores comes out, summons a big ass token. All right, I'll negate the token then. Surely I can do that. That's a special summon, right? Like, it is, but you can't negate that either. Why not? It's an effect. All right, my opponent activates return from different dimension. He's going for game. Can I negate that with Thunder King? You actually can't. Why can't I do it? Because it's not the kind of special summon it needs to be for you to negate it. So this card doesn't actually do anything. Nope, it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, so like when it already comes to something very simple like that, like a card, you pretty much need to know a lot of foresight of how a card even works when the plain text of it says do this, but it doesn't actually do that. Today
we literally played some Dueling Book before this call, and our opponent tried to Royal Oppression our Mystic Tomato. Like that happened. An hour before this call, someone tried to Royal Oppression Mystic Tomato. You can never, that is never possible. Never possible. It's in the damage step. You can't do it. But Oppression just says, when your opponent special summons a monster, pay 100, negate it. But the rules of the game, like the intricate rules of the game, tell you that you can't play cards like that in a damage step.
Right.
And there's a lot of that in Yu-Gi-Oh!
And things even get muddled even further beyond that. So I think the barrier of entry is like understanding the complexity of the game. It's very complex and daunting to new players. And then additionally, like, TCG Player is great. I do like the website. I like the resource that it offers. But I still feel like personally for me, I'm like, it's like getting cards is still like, it's challenging. Like
it is.
It's not as easy as I feel like it should be, but that's just the way it is. So like, there's no way I'm going to be like, let's change the way that we can get cards. But if it's going to be like, oh, Edison format's going to be like rotating this out and putting this in, I'm like, yeah, that seems like just another like complication to throw on top of a game that I think is kind of difficult to get into.
I would love, we said it before, but I would love if they started making more like remaking old packs, like the Edison format packs, just to get those cards back in circulation. I know it would hurt the secondary market for some people, but like, I don't know.
Yeah, if Konami was just like, here's $5. This is like a booster pack of like, I guess you could say Edison staples. You get Wing Blast, you get Bottomless, you get Heavy, you get Brain Control, you get MST, you get all these things. And it's just like commercially you can buy it at a store. It's like, oh, well, that's convenient.
Yeah,
or like a card shop.
What it would really be is a random, it would be a box. So it would have several cards in it, like 100 plus or whatever. But they would all be Edison format. And they would come in cool rarities. So that way, even people who have everything, right? Because a lot of people in Edison format are long-time collectors and just have a lot of the cards already. But if they release things like Card Trooper with a new rarity, Wing Blast with a new rarity, Stardust Dragon with a new rarity, Caius with a new rarity, then it makes it where everyone wants these cards because they'd probably be expensive. But then the cards also just come common or like a low rarity in that thing. So that way, people who want to play an old format in paper, like in person, they can just buy several copies of this pack or buy a box of it and basically have the entire Edison format. Like you'll get your Substitutes, your Swap Frogs, your Monarchs, your Wing Blast,
be cool too.
Your Zombies.
Speaking of things coming to new rarities, not just like Caius is usually super, so now he comes ultra or whatever. Yeah. It'd be cool too if they added the new rarities and like, for example, Stardust Dragon as a Starlight rare. You know what I mean?
That'd be beautiful.
Like they added the new rarities to like these sets too would be kind of cool.
And I wouldn't be mad if they even made a new rarity for just Time Wizard format, like a Time Wizard rarity, where the cards look. And this is Konami, feel free to take this idea, but they have a literal rarity called Time Wizard rarity, and the cards are aged. They look aged, like the actual border of the card looks like.
It's kind of like a fake like aging on them.
Yes, like the card is mint, obviously, but the card looks like it's distressed. It has like distressing on the card.
So and you can do that in a way where it looks cool.
Yes.
So even though it looks aged, it looks really fucking.
I mean, that's how people in like the clothing industry, like Like there's some like clothing brands that are like, well, it looks like you're wearing like Tathers, but it's like kind of street and like
my
cool
grandmother
looking.
used to make fun of me all the time for wearing holes in my clothes. She's like, why do you have holes in your clothes? And you are fully an accountant and I know you make good money. And I'm like, Grandma, this is the style. She's like, you look homeless.
Dude, I mean, Kanye needs a job. Like they can,
But
they can ask Kanye.
I agree with the point here because I actually know someone, my friend Veda, who goes to the same local as me, which is so weird because
I'll be there tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
So, the whole gang is going through.
Yes. So my friend Veda, I've known him for a long time now because he's from the fighting game community and he's a Philly fighting game player. So if you know the name Veda, he plays Marvel vs. Capcom 3 primarily is what he's known for. But anyway, he said that I always liked Yu-Gi-Oh! But I could never ever play Modern because the barrier to entry was always that you guys get new decks that are expensive as fuck every couple months, and I can't keep up with that. He was like, I tried to play back when Glad Beasts were popular, and then eventually Teledad came out, and Teledad was over $1,000. And then after you guys were done with Teledad, you went to Lightsworn, and Lightsworn was $1,000. And then after that, and then he just like, I could never keep up with that, and the game just progressively got more and more of, you need this deck to win or to do well. And your old deck is completely invalid. Like it gets to a point where they either ban your deck and it's unplayable, or the new deck is just so much more stronger than yours. The power creep happens, and you need to buy new cards. So he's like, I like Edison, and now I'm like, he plays Yu-Gi-Oh every single week, and he plays Yu-Gi-Oh essentially more than me because what he does is he goes to locals, he goes to AU, and he will set up shop with his friend, and they'll duel the entire time they're there. My black ass goes to AU, and I literally talk to Silverman and McCabe all day, and we just kind of like make fun of each other about random life things and barely play Yu-Gi-Oh! And then we play 3 rounds in a tournament and go the fuck to Applebee's or some shit at the end. Like we do not play Yu-Gi-Oh! Really. We just play in a tournament and that is it. And the rest of it is just us hanging out because we just enjoyed that so much more. But like there are people who come there and just set up shop and duel, and it's so cool to see that. And I say all of this to say he would have never even played Yu-Gi-Oh! At all, really, if it weren't for something like Edison format existing where it's locked. He likes the fact that once he buys a Glad Beasts deck in Edison, he doesn't have to worry about it getting banned. He doesn't have to worry about new cards coming out that he has to buy. He doesn't have to worry about the rarity of the card either, because every card in Edison format comes in common, and it also comes in some high-ass rarity if you want it. And that's the thing I love about it personally, but the barrier to entry for Edison format is so low because it's a locked format and every single card comes common. So Silverman was telling me last week, and this goes back to your TCG player point, Stango. Silverman was saying to me last week how he could order the entire Lightsworn deck because he loves Lightsworn. He won his first YCS with Lightsworn. So he was saying, I wanted to order the whole Lightsworn deck common, and I found it all on TCG player. He said, the problem was I added it all to my cart, and it was coming from 40 different people. And he was like, I'm not doing that. He's like, I'm not paying shipping because you have to pay shipping on every individual order. He's like, I'm not paying $1 to 40 different vendors. Like that's not happening. Like the deck is common and it is super cheap.
You kind of get nickel and dime in every direction.
Right.
And it's also a thing of it as well, is that like for me, like right now, my zombie deck's transitioning to a completely different build than when I started with. And like me, as a brand new paper player, like I essentially almost had to rebuy my entire deck, my side deck, my extra deck, my main deck. And it's just like, man, it's just so annoying. Yeah. But like once I'm completed, I'm gonna be good. Like if I want to make changes, it's just something I can do.
The thing
but
that's
like, when it comes to like modern or anything that rotates, it's like
modern is a whole different beast. The thing that'll happen over time with Edison, the more you play it, is like as the meta develops, as we hope it does, right? Yeah. We hope the meta continues. That's kind of the point of this video, is that Fraser thought the meta was solved, and we're at a part now where like it's maybe developed. And we haven't even got to that part of the topic yet. But anyway, the meta continues to develop as we hope it do, even without changes to the card pool.
Yes.
You will have to buy new cards for your side deck, your extra deck, etc. as time goes on. But as time goes on, you'll amass a crew of cards because, like you said, it's not changing. So you'll be able to swap things in and out for different decks, etc.
And that's happening to me right now, where I had to order a couple cards, actually. I had to order Shire, Lightsworn Spirit, because no one has that fucking card. She's just a Lightsworn monster who happens to be a fairy. So in the Lightsworn fairy deck, which we'll definitely be talking about this episode, she's played in it and no one has it. I had to order Nobleman of Extermination because no one has that card around me anyway. And it's super old. It has a lot of actual printing, but no one has it. So I had to order that card. And that's a card that I never thought that I would be playing either. So when I started Edison format last year, I spent about $5,000 to $6,000 buying what I thought was every single deck, every single card. And I do have a box that has essentially every relevant deck and every single card. But then there's always like these little things that I'll be missing every once in a while. And that's because the format changes. For example, I don't own, until now, Legacy of Yatagarasu. And I had to go and buy them on TCG Player or dig them out. Or Jargri is the same thing. But I don't own those cards, and I didn't think that I would ever have to buy them because when I first got into Edison format, I just went on like edisonformat.com. I saw all of the main decks, and I just was like, okay, I need to buy Glad Beast, Black Wings, Lightsworn, Frogs, Heroes, Gear, the machine decks that play the big ass machines, like what are they called?
Not gadgets.
Gear Town or whatever, like those guys.
Gear Town.
The whole Gear Town, and like Machina and stuff like that. I had to buy the whole quick draw deck, and you get the idea. Flamvel. I ended up buying every single deck that I thought was relevant, but then the format is so cool because when I thought I bought everything, it's like, well, there's still things that you just never thought that you would need, and that is promising about it. But like Kenny said, at the same time, once I buy these things, I don't have to worry about them becoming irrelevant per se. Like I bought Revive King Hades. I bought an ulti because I like having my extra deck ulti. If a card comes ulti, I always have it. So that's just how I am. So I had to buy an ulti Revive King Hades. Pretty expensive. But I was like, well, the good thing is the value of this card technically is going to always hold its value because Edison format will continue to be played for a while. It's a super old card. Ulti doesn't care about reprints. Like once like an ulti Stardust, I don't give a fuck how many Stardust. You can have a common Stardust, doesn't matter. Ulti's going to hold its value. So I bought an ulti Revive King. And I didn't have that at first. I had to buy it like late in the year because zombies became a real deck. It became a very real deck actually.
Yep.
But that's the thing. Like when I first jumped into Edison last year, I had my preconceived notions about the format, and then I had new preconceived notions about the format, and now I'm at a point where I have a completely different perspective on the format. So there was a period where I was like, okay, it's not going to get much better than like the zombie deck, for example. And then at one point I thought that the dragon deck was really like overpowered and stuff like that. But then that has consistency issues. And then I saw the Frog Hero deck and I was like, oh man, that deck's so broken. Like Substitute is crazy, which it is. I thought it wouldn't really get much better than that because frogs are so close to being just undisputed outrageous, right? But they have their own issues too. And then it got to a point in the middle of the year where Black Wings just kind of like started dominating, and they pretty much dominated an entire 6-month period of Edison format, and it became a little depressing /
stale.
Yeah, super stale, right? Like every tournament we saw, the deck that won, and honestly most of the top 4 was just Blackwing or like some variation of Blackwing. Like Value Turbo, when I say Blackwing, I'm including Value Turbo in there too. So if it plays predominantly like Vayu, Sirocco, and stuff like that. I don't care if you play Shore, Whirlwind, Bora, Blizzard, and all that stuff. If your deck has predominantly like Blackwing as an engine, it's a Blackwing deck, and that was what was winning pretty much everything and taking the most top spots in every tournament. And that just kind of like, Blackwings it's not the most fun deck to play. So if every match is gonna be Blackwing mirrors or a lot of just seeing that, it's not really that fun, and it takes away, like I said, kind of the point of the format is that there's so many different decks. But luckily innovation happened, and that's again what we're talking about here. So the fairy deck has always existed, the like regular fairy deck, right? It's always existed since I jumped into Edison format. When I first got in like January, February, the fairy deck had top 8'd the RBET1, I guess it was back then. It was in top 8. And it was one of the first decks that I tried to play because I was like, I've never seen this deck before in my life. Like, this is completely new to me, and I just want to try it out, see what it's like. I tried it out. We came to find out it's actually really, really fucking good. Like, really good. So then I tried to play it in the next RBET tournament, and I played against Lightsworn round 1. And I didn't know that matchup is actually, like, not fun. The reason why it's not fun is because Lightsworn is fast, and once they get to a certain point, you just get clapped by JDs and stuff like that. Like you're trying to slow grind with DD War Ladies. My opponent's like Charge, Mill Wolf, Mill Plague, Sir Child Lumina, Summon Card Trooper Mill 3. He ends up milling Necro Gardener, and this is all turn 1. And I'm like, okay, I'm obviously getting sacked, but I could immediately tell if he draws spell cards, I'm just gonna have a bad time. So I ended up getting 2-0'd because game 2 was like more of the same. He just opened up spells and just completely dominated me. And my deck I had like Raikou and Shining Angel and stuff like that, but it was just too slow.
It's not enough with how much milling he's doing.
Yes, it was too slow. So I ended up switching off of the fairy deck. I was like, man, this deck has a lot of normal summons. It's very slow, and it's not good if people are actually playing shit like Dragon Turbo. It's not particularly good against Lightsworn. And then, some other decks that can be like a problem because of their tempo. Like, I don't think it has the best Frog matchup either. It's kind of an awkward deck to go against because you're just putting a bunch of recruiters on the field, and like Caius is annoying and Ryzen and all that stuff. So I was like, these matchups are not really good for the fairy deck. But then what ends up happening, without me realizing it at first, was Blackwings becomes the best deck. Like, it becomes the most dominant deck by actual statistics. Like, you just look at all the decks that have topped. Blackwings last year in 2022 racked up the absolute most tops across all tournaments, right? So Blackwings takes over, but what happens with that is Blackwings has an abysmal matchup technically against the fucking fairy deck. And that is because not really necessarily just game one, but because Consecrated Light simply exists, and that card is actually like a OTK against Blackwings. So Blackwings has this really hard matchup all of a sudden where now you're the most dominant, but you have a matchup that people are now picking up and playing more towards the end of the year. And even RBET Rulers, which was the culmination of the year, like there was a new, first of all, Fairies won. So the fairy deck, the regular slow fairy deck won. And it had some really cool choices in it, like Legacy Yatagarasu. But then you also had in that top 8 a new Lightsworn fairy deck that plays triple Christia, triple Herald, no Wolves. And that deck is also outrageous because it does this, it sides Consecrated Light as well. And it's fat, but it has the speed of Lightsworn. This is the speed of Lightsworn, but also the explosiveness of Christia on top of it. It sounded like you wanted to say something, Stingo?
No, I was just I was just gonna point out with what you were saying is with that whole dynamic between Blackwings and Fairies, it kind of like Blackwings Rise almost like put Fairies like in a good position
It did.
in the meta game
100%.
in general because it's the good meta pick into the best deck, which when you're talking about things like Monarchs, which can also be a bit of a challenging matchup, but Blackwings I think are still favored for them.
Yeah.
They like Monarchs are a little more decentivized. Zombies is a really tough matchup against Blackwings. They just set too many monsters. Sure, they're all sure food. You get pierced with Bora, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Oppression. So yeah, a lot of these things where like Fairies can maybe struggle against like just the really quick decks, like Blackwings like kind of like pushes those decks out because they're just the best beater deck.
Yep.
And then Fairies just gets put in a good position just by process of elimination there.
Yeah, so
it's just interesting how that dynamic kind of loops around.
Yeah, it's kind of, I'm going to talk about Melee a little bit, and you correct me if I'm wrong on anything, but if everyone started to play Fox, like literally everyone, right?
Marth would be the best character. It's not close.
There you go. So that's exactly what I'm saying, and so Fairies got a huge buff because Blackwings became so dominant. Fox became so dominant, therefore Marth becomes outrageous.
Yep. And the reason why Marth is not the best character in the game is because there's characters that keep him in check, like Sheik, like other matchups that are a little difficult.
Kenny is giving some disagreement.
Wait a minute. I was all on board when we were saying Marth's the best. I was like, that's right. And Marth is the best. He's the best. And then some other shit started being said, and I don't
Kenny,
know.
For people who don't know, Kenny believes that Marth is the best character in Melee. Most people believe that Fox is the best character in Melee. And
listen, Kenny, I'll spare this conversation with you and not pull out my credentials. I'm just going to tell you.
Listen, real quick.
I'll
credentials.
Spare this
that's an argument to authority. Doesn't mean shit.
No, it's fair. It's fair. But yeah, I think the biggest thing in that situation is that just like as far as you're saying, like if the meta gets pigeonholed into like we all identify this as the best character or best deck. Colloquially, it's really nice that Edison has the diversity that it has because it circles back where me and Fraser talk a lot about Yu-Gi-Oh and we agree Blackwing's best deck. It's not close. There isn't a better deck.
Yes,
but when the game gets hyper focused around that, where it's like Blackwing's best deck, that diversity that all of a sudden didn't matter kind of starts looping back around to mattering again. When it's like all spread out and everyone's like kind of playing their bullshit, playing whatever they want. Blackwings is just like, oh, beat Cat, beat Glad Beast, beat Diva Hero.
Decks.
Yeah, Black Wings is just going to kind of start picking them off. But then when it's like, oh, well, here's the meta threat, let's counter to it now. And it's like everyone starts building these things like the new Frog Monarch deck, right. Fairies, all that stuff.
So I want to interject right here. Okay, so we brought this up a couple times throughout this podcast, but I want to make it very clear our stance here. Black Wings is the best deck in Edison format. Full stop. Like, full stop. Black Wings is the best deck. I do not think that any other deck in the format is on the exact same level. There are obviously decks that, like the fairy decks can have a good matchup, but just because you beat the best deck doesn't mean
you're the best deck.
Exactly. Yep. Because the matchup spreads matter, right? So when you look at matchup spreads, Black Wings doesn't really have any bad matchup outside of literally fairies. Like fairies is the only matchup where it's kind of hard, but even fairies isn't. I would even say that the fairy matchup is that bad because Black Wings can absolutely blow that deck out too. It really just depends on what you guys draw and how well the players know the matchup and how well they play. But I think a good Black Wing player against a good fairy player, it can go either way. And I say that because there are blowout cards. There are blowout cards
on both sides.
Yes. Yep. So deck devastation virus, I literally played against my friend who uses like Xavier. I played against my friend Xavier. And I let him borrow the fairy deck all the time because I just have it built. And I let him borrow the fairy deck to play in locals. And every time we come across each other, we have some really cool games, some really grindy games. But I cannot tell you the number of times that either I or someone else at locals has deck devastation virused him. And he has literally discarded his entire fucking hand. Like actually, factually lost all 5 of his cards to deck Devi. Like that is an
deck
actual
Devi
thing.
Just becomes royal tribute against fairies.
Yeah, this is
it draws hand where it's just completely done.
Summon Greffer, pitch Vayu or Sirocco, doesn't matter which. Activate, banish, summon Armwing, set deck Devi, go. And this is like not the craziest combo, right? Like it is literally a 3-card combo, but a lot of people play 3, Greffer, 3 Vayu, 3 Sirocco. So that part of the combo, like drawing Greffer and Vayu or Sirocco is not some crazy thing. And then a lot of the Blackwing players just saw double deck Devi. And so every time it comes up, that is a fucking auto win. Like that game is over. Like you're cooked. And then you have other things that make the matchup kind of weird too. Like Light Imprisoning Mirror is really good against the fairy deck as well. And then Consecrated Light is like so broken against Black Wings, and it's technically searchable if they attack one of your recruiters. So the matchup is really, really back and forth. And I would honestly put it like unbiased because I am an obvious Black Wing person. But like if I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible, I would say at best, fairies is 50-50 with Black Wings. Like that is my stance. I think that at best it's a 50-50 matchup. And if I wanted to be biased, I would say that it is a 55-45 matchup.
If you were trying to be charitable, you're going to call it even, but but like, just how good Black Wings is, you feel.
I feel it's a 55-45 in Black Wings' favor. I feel like, and maybe this could be my own experience where when I play against fairies with Black Wings, I feel like I can win every match. Like I feel like I can win every best 2 out of 3, and I don't feel like at any point that I'm like, oh my god, this matchup is so awful. I feel awful when I'm playing Hero Beat or Hero Stun against fairies because that matchup is actually abysmal. It's like 90-10, like actually. But when I'm playing Black Wings, I'm like, well, you could lose to me just Icarus attacking you and chaining to one of your cards. Like if you have Dialk on the field, right? They have Dialk and like let's say a Shining Angel or something. They have 2 guys on the field and they go activate Dialk effect and I go chain Icarus attack and pop Dialk, pop the Shining Angel. You literally don't get to resolve Dimensional Alchemist because it misses timing. So like little interactions like that, because it's a really grindy match. It's like a very grindy back and forth match. But little interactions like that can like give Black Wings the edge. And it just like you have your 3 Blizzards, and honestly, Herald of Orange Light is really not the best against Black Wings because Black Wings is just such a advantage heavy deck and also a damage deck. Like Blizzard is ridiculous. Whirlwind is still auto win. Like if you're playing against fairies, Whirlwind is still an auto win in that matchup. And Whirlwind is super auto win against every other matchup. It is actually crazy. Like I agree with everyone who says that Whirlwind should not be at 2. It's one of the biggest misses that happen with the format. Whirlwind is just absolutely fucking outrageous. It's a card that you have to answer immediately. Like if you don't answer it, you can lose to anyone playing any way they want to play. They don't have to be good. They don't have to play correctly. Whirlwind by itself is just so, it turns your deck into a gadget deck, but like the most ridiculous gadget deck
you're not just searching for bullshit ass normal summons.
Yes, you're searching for shit that halves your monster's attack. Shit that summons Yugioh Guardian as a normal summon. Like the fact that Blizzard is normal summon Brionic, normal summon Yugioh Guardian. That's what Blizzard actually says. It also says against certain matchups, normal summon a 2800 trample. Like, these are crazy. That's a crazy thing in this format. So, my reasons for believing that Blackwing's the best deck comes down to a couple factors. Is Kalut is at 3. Kalut's not okay. Like, it's just not a fair card at all. The fact that you can use it on open life points makes things so awkward, because sometimes you're like, okay, I can take that attack, but if he randomly has Kalut, I might die. Like, literally one time I happened to be at like 3,000 and a guy attacked me with Bora, and he just has one card in hand. I'm sitting there thinking to myself, well, this is awkward, because I normally wouldn't want to kill a Bora with a trap card. Like, I want to just attack over it or something like that. But I was like, if that's just actually Kalut, I lose the game. And there's no way for me to know. Like, it could just be game. So it's like, Kalut is ridiculous. Shura is so good against everything in the format. Like, honestly, Shura is good against zombies. It's good against like all the bullshit decks. It's good against everything with Kalut or Gale, because nothing in a format is 3,200. Like, nothing in a format, like Shura being 3,200 literally beats over every monster. I've had people go turn 1 Titanial, and like they go Foolish Burial for Dandelion, and they have Titanial with 2 tokens on the field. And it's just like, summon Shura, attack, Kalut, kill her, get value, attack, kill a token, synchro, make Catastor, set deck Devi, go, draw phase, deck Devi, you lose your token, you lose your hand. Like, that is an actual duel I played. But it's just crazy, like the things that I've pulled off with Blackwings and the things that I've seen other people do, and the fact that it gets to play oppression is not really affected by it. And the fact that it gets to play like so many good side deck cards, and your engine is so strong and it's consistent. Like, a lot of times when I try to play over decks, so we do the Master and People series, and so we force ourselves to play decks that we don't actually play. Like, I personally do not like the Dragon Turbo deck because it's inconsistent. So I thought it was a cool deck when it first came out. I made my own like Machina version of it and stuff like that. But I couldn't see myself entering a real tournament. Like, if there was a real, 10-round tournament, like 10 rounds of Swiss before Top Cut, if there was a real tournament like that, I could not see myself actually taking Dragon Turbo to a tournament and saying, I'm going to get to play every game. Because essentially it doesn't matter what your opponent draws or does. If you don't get to play the game because your hand is just brick, you can lose to anything. Like, you can actually sit there and get beat down by Gadgets, which is not a good deck. You can lose to like literally any, like they can
lose to fucking Mad Dog of Darkness and Archfiend Soldier.
Yes. I say it all the time. Like, you could actually lose if your opponent's like Summon Gemini Elf.
You know, that's actually funny. That's literally funny. I think our last Master and People episode, Fraser, and I quote, literally said, he's like, well, he could have just gone summon Archfiend and attacked with 1900 beaters and we would have lost.
Yes, our hand was so unplayable. And the episode will go eventually on our Patreon. But our hand in the first set we played was literally so unplayable. And I didn't edit it out the video. Like, when I upload the video, the first match that you'll see is us getting, I think we lose 2-0 to this guy. But like, we get 2-0'd because we don't draw anything either game. Like, we just brick twice. And people try to argue like, oh, it doesn't brick that much, stuff like that. But honestly, if I lose one
You're
round,
lying.
You are lying. You're like copium for sure. But also, if I lose a whole round to a person because I literally didn't get to play the game, that doesn't feel good. And that never happens to me when I play something like Blackwings or Zombies or like most of the other decks. You at least get to play the game, right? Like setting Hamster, setting Spy, or like setting Raiko, or summoning Shura, or something, like getting to play the game. At the end of the day, I just value that so much more than, if I Cards of Consonance Whitestone and draw Future Fusion often and like get to resolve Super Drew for crazy amounts and draw my whole deck, yes, I will kill my opponent. I don't value that in Edison format. I just don't value this whole idea of trying to go crazy bonkers OTK your opponent. Like, I know people want it to be modern so bad, but it just isn't that. And I think that there are better decks that play the lottery than Dragon Turbo. But like, my real point here is not even on the Dragon Turbo deck. It's just kind of it's the exact opposite of Blackwings to me. Blackwings, I feel like, is the most consistent. And then you have the Dragon Turbo deck, which is the most inconsistent. And I think that what you're trading is actually not worth it, because you'll just win most of your games with Blackwings anyway if you're really good. Like, you'll just beat most of the other decks and people if you're a good player and you're playing Blackwings than you would if you were playing Dragon Turbo. Like, I wonder, I guess for me, it's always like, who are you so afraid of that you feel like you need to have a deck that is a lottery?
You need to cheat them out of a game, pretty much. You need to literally unfairly beat them out of a game.
Yeah, like, are you afraid to like actually play against people? Because you're not actually dueling with the Dragon Turbo deck. Like, you're not. You're trying to do one thing and one thing only, and it's It's a
That's
good
the
thing.
thing. I think some people they find that fun. Like they just want to rip the cards.
Oh,
like that's it.
I love
it. They just want to rip the cards.
I agree with that 100% because at one point I was terrorizing people with the Nerlaris deck. There were 4 weeks in a row. Okay, that's a full month where I played Nerlaris every single week, and I made sure everyone knew I was. So like every week I would come and I'll be like, "Y'all put crows in your main deck yet?" And they would just start laughing. And no one did it, but I was like, "Y'all put crow," and I would just go undefeated every week with Nerlaris. But that was because one, they weren't doing anything ignorant like main decking at least a single copy of crow, and two, I was also drawing so fucking unreal. Like I was just drawing broken every single week. And then eventually there was a 2-week period where I just got clapped. I just drew red eyes, wyvern, a trade-in, dark creator, and then I would play that and draw into absolutely nothing, like heavy storm, giant Trune, and my hand is unplayable. I did not draw next turn, it's like Necroguard, and then I draw again, Plague Spreader Zombie. I'm like, okay, well this deck, like, and by that time, your opponent has realized you're playing this bullshit Nerlaris deck, so I can actually go ape on you and kill you. And that didn't feel good. It didn't feel good to lose the people who I normally would beat if we had to actually duel. And so that's kind of like my biggest gripe with playing something like Dragon Turbo. But again,
like Kenny said, deck like that, a deck like that, it's funny because you can beat people that you normally couldn't ever beat. But you lose to people that you would normally never lose to.
Isn't that cool to think about? Like
that is an interesting dynamic of it.
Yeah, like I could lose to a Dragon Turbo player who's never beat me in a actual long game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because they just drew busted, and sometimes it's too much. But I also, like, I could lose to somebody with the Dragon Turbo deck, but I could also beat somebody. I don't really know who it would be that I can't beat, but that's that. But like for other people, it applies where they could beat someone really fucking good, and they normally have never beat that person with Dragon Turbo, and I, being really good, could lose to someone who I never lost to because of Dragon Turbo just drawing shit. So I just choose to play Black Wings because not only is it a really good deck, but I'm comfortable when we both start off and we do the die roll, we sit down, we do the die roll, and they're like, I'll go first. I am not afraid when I'm playing Black Wings. I am because I don't have to worry about,
With Black Wings, it's just like, Frazier said it a lot of times when we've been doing Mastering People and just in our general conversations, normal summon Shura is a big enough play by itself. Like, you don't need all this extra stuff to like win the game. Like a normal summon Shura is already a threat because it has the implication for so much.
Yes, it means so much to just normal summon that monster puts so much fear into every deck's heart. It's like, okay, so does he have Kalut? Does he have Gale? What's going to happen with it if this Shura resolves? Like, can I afford to set my recruiter now? And what I was saying about the die roll, right? So I lose the die roll with Black Wings, obviously 50% of the time, and when I was playing decks that play Raikou, which is almost every deck that's not Black Wings, like they find a way to put Raikou in their deck. When I was playing decks that have to set Raikou, losing the die rolls fucking sucks. Like it blows when you have, like your deck is a hamster or Raikou setting deck and you lose the die roll and your opponent goes set their Raikou or their hamster first. It does not feel good. And I've played so much of Edison format where that was what we were doing, where, you set a monster and then you pass and your opponent sets their monster, then you flip yours and you pop their back row, then you tribute for Caius. And that's like the classic Edison. Like if somebody said, what is the most common play in Edison? It's like turn 1 Raikou into the turn 2 Caius. That is like the most common Edison play. And almost 50% of the decks in the format do that play, right? Like they just find a way, like they all can just do that. But I personally just do not want to do that anymore. Like I've done it a lot and it just feels so much better to summon monsters face up and get things going immediately. Also having a lot of crazy top decks. And as much as I love resolving Pot of Avarice, it's just not worth the fear of I might not get to resolve this card because I got Caius because I went second and he got to set Goblin Zombie and he's going to go Goblin Zombie, tribute, summon Caius, or summon Diva, flip up Goblin Zombie and all that stuff. Like it's going first is obviously problematic in the format in general, but we can't change that. Only thing that you can change is the deck that you choose to play. And Black Wings is broken going first or second. Like going first is like really good with the deck, obviously, because it plays a lot of ignorant ass cards. But also going second is good because you can literally just do ignorant shit like summon Sirocco, summon Bora, pump for 37 attack. And that is 3,600 damage over a set Raikou for no reason. Your opponent's at half-life, turn 1.
Yeah. I mean, it's just I mean, you pretty much explained every point that I fully agree with.
Yep. So the overarching point here was that I agree, and I think I've pretty much gotten like my group of friends to agree that like Black Wings is the best deck in the format. Of course, people will have their own opinions about what they think is the best deck, and that's fine. Like that is, I'm not here to like convince anyone, but I want to state why I think it's the best deck. And I've been playing the format for a year now, and I just feel like I've yet to play anything where I'm piloting it, and I feel like I'm in so much more control than Black Wings. Like Black Wings, I just feel like I'm in control. Now, what I will say is, I wanted to talk about this deck really bad because I think this deck is problematic as hell, and it freaks me out. It scares me.
The fear.
Like, it literally puts the fear of God into my heart. The new Lightsworn Fairy deck that came out in RBET Rulers is cracked. Like it is actually fucking cracked. Now I have no problem being honest to people about like things that I think are good, because when I was a competitive Yu-Gi-Oh player, I would never blatantly tell people my actual thoughts. Like that was just not who I was. As a competitor, I felt like it was better to just withhold information like that and use it instead to win tournaments and to do well at tournaments. But I am not in that same headspace anymore because I'm not a super competitive Yu-Gi-Oh player anymore. Like I play, Edison every once in a while, but at the same time, there are no YCSs for Edison format. The cool thing is though, there is a PS5 tournament coming up in PA in February, at the end of February, that we will be going to, and that should be really fun. And that'll be like one of the first real competitive events where the prize is like really good, and I can expect a lot of good players to show up for it and all that good stuff. And it's paper Yu-Gi-Oh, not bullshit dueling book, because dueling book is trash. But like that will be one of the first like competitive events that I get to play in for Edison format. That's not a side event. That's just a few rounds or whatever. You get a mat. It's like, no, this is a real structure. Like you're going to play seven or more rounds of Swiss. There's going to be a cut to top, whatever. And you're going to do a playoff round, eliminations, and someone's going to win a PS5. Like that is, and I haven't done something like that in so long. It's been literally over half a decade since I've played in a tournament like that. So I'm excited. The Edison format is so supported by locals and communities now that we're getting shit like that. But I just feel so in control. Again, playing Black Wings. But when I play this Lightsworn Fairy deck, because it came out, I guess November was RBET Rulers. So it came out in November. And at first I was like, all right, well, I wasn't really playing Edison anymore. My friend group, we kind of all just stopped playing Edison for a bit. And then I saw the deck list and I started messaging the group chat. I was like, yo, there's a lot of innovation that has happened in Edison format since we stopped playing. Like like first of all, Black Wings didn't win that tournament. So that was cool. Like Fairies actually won. But not only was it a fairy deck, it was like a 42 card fairy deck that played Legacy Yagarasu in the main deck, one Raikou, and stuff. And it had one Cyber Volley because it's searchable, and Mind Control. So I was like, yo, that's a lot of innovation. Like, yeah, these are really small changes to the fairy deck, but they matter so much. Like, they matter so much. And I was like, oh, I really like this. And then I started looking at the other frog decks. Like, there's that Malicious Edge, kind of like an Evil Hero frog deck where it plays a bunch of Infernal Prodigies and a bunch of Malicious Edges because you draw a card if you tribute Infernal Prodigy for that. And it also obviously plays Miracle Fusion and Substitute, so it does all the dupe block nonsense. It does all the Caiuses, but then it has a really cool tribute monster, a 2600 guy that tramples, which doesn't seem like much, but the fact that theoretically Stratos can search it changes the scope of that deck, because technically Stratos is searching a Monarch at that point because he's a tribute summon Monarch. He's huge. He's 26, so he beats Monarchs. And you draw a card if you tribute a Evil Hero Infernal Prodigy for it, which is really cool because the deck plays multiple. And then it has the Miracle Fusion, stuff like that. So that's innovation. Because before, go ahead, Singer, you want to say something?
Yeah, so it can't really be understated, like how good that edge is, because one of the things that was always a little problematic for the Frog deck is that if it was kind of slow on drawing its Monarchs, now it has another normal summon because it only requires one tribute. A Treeborn in the grave and a monster on the field is enough to bring it out. It's like a 7-star monster, but you can bring it out.
Yeah, it is actually.
Yeah, you can bring it out if your opponent has a monster on the field, and it just gives you another play, because sometimes your hand can just be like bullshit where you're just like swap frog, X cards, and you can't really like beat over a monster, and you're just kind of sitting there taking some damage. But now you can just kind of summon this big ass guy and just start attacking as well. But I think actually, I do like the Malicious Edge, but I think what can't be understated is the Junk Synchron. Yep. I think that is what actually broke the formula for the Frog deck.
I agree, because it adds a third layer to the deck. So the deck
damn, people play Junk Synchron now?
It's broken in
that's
Frogs.
Sick. I fucking love Junk Synchron, and that's cool as hell. Junk Synchron's sick.
So
go ahead. You can.
Okay, you want me to explain?
Rock, paper, scissors. I'll try to. You let me know if I'm fucking up.
Okay. Go ahead.
So I think Kenny, to explain what Junk Synchron adds to the deck, obviously it targets level 2 or lower in the grave. So it's going to bring back primarily 2 targets, Swap Frog or Dupe Frog.
Yep.
It does negate their effects, but the interesting interaction with Swap Frog is that Swap Frog's cost to return to hand the effect is a cost. So the effect, even though it's negated, like you can bounce your Monarchs back, you can bounce your Junk Synchron back.
Yep.
Sometimes what they do with the Frog deck is that they have a Treeborn and they're like, okay, summon Junk, get Swap, bounce Junk. Now I have 2 monsters that are blocking attacks, and I'm just kind of biding time to find Monarchs.
Yeah. That's really cool. It's really
the other thing they do is they do Dupe Frog, big ass 2000, but negates are effects are negated, so they can still attack everything. But once Dupe hits the grave, he's no longer negated anymore, and he actually activates to add frogs to your graveyard or from your deck. Get the substitute mill.
That's legit. I'm gonna have to buy some Junk Synchrons.
Yeah, Junk Synchron is broken in frogs. It is so good.
So I want to talk about the layers that Monarchs have gone through since 2010, when people played bullshit Monarch decks that literally just went bring back Treeborn Frog, tribute for Monarch. Now, it's funny because when me and Kenny first started playing Edison format last year, he was like, I really don't like just doing this one play per turn nonsense where you just like tribute.
Yeah, I really wanted to innovate. Like, I just wanted a Monarch deck that did more plays than just try to summon a Monarch every turn.
And so it got to a point where he found a way to put Chaos Sorcerer in the deck, and like I think there was like Cyber Dragon and like at one point Dark Arm and stuff like that. And you get to a point where you're like, I just want to do more things. So people have been playing for a while, and they like really innovated the Frog deck to add heroes to it in Miracle Fusion. So now the deck goes Tribute for Monarch, and if you stop that, it can then go Miracle Fusion. So it has another layer. So it goes from just Monarchs, right, which is like a Battle Fader and like 15 Monarch type cards, Vanity's Fiend, all that stuff, right? You just max out 3 Thestalos, 3 Ryza, 3 Kaias, Dark Dust Spirit, and there's that classic Monarch deck that everyone probably remembers who played Yu-Gi-Oh! Way back in the day. That's like the classic Monarch deck. It even played Light and Darkness Dragon. And then you get to modern Edison format, where people have added Miracle Fusion and heroes to it. And then you get to an even more modern version now, like what I would call like 2023 Frog Hero Monarch, where now you add Junk Synchrons to it. So the deck at this point can go Monarch, Miracle Fusion, and also Synchro plays. So it's like doing multiple things. And that, like adding that third layer of now it can go into Brionic, like reliably. Like literally, if at any point you just go bring back Dreamer Frog, summon Junk Synchron, bring back a 2-star, that's Brionic at any point. And that's really valuable.
And that's a push for game with Miracle Fusion, Zero. Also, like the Junk Synchron also adds like another like hidden dynamic. Like Frog decks just now play Dark Arm. They just play the best boss monster as well because he's a dark. Frog should not be able to Kaiish you and then like, all right, it's time to drop Dark Arm. You're dead. That's it.
That is actually crazy that they play, because Malicious Edge, I think he's Earth, but Infernal Prodigy is dark. Junk Synchron is dark. Battle Fader is dark, and Battle Fader sometimes gets discarded to the graveyard because you'll use it for like a Wing Blast or whatever. Junk Synchron can be in the graveyard sometimes.
Gores.
Gores, Trag, and all that stuff. Like 3 Kaias. So it plays enough dark monsters where it can get away with just actually playing Dark Arm, and they do play Dark Arm. And that is wild because Dark Arm is the best boss monster in the format, and that is like no contest.
And then with Junk Synchron, its last thing, which like I just can't believe how many things this card does by himself. He also just beats over Fossildyna. He's 100 more. And that card is like really problematic for frogs because once you got the Treeborn in the grave and it's just Fossildyna walking on you, like
it's actually kind of fun.
You don't have a single normal summon that beats it pretty much besides like Stratos and shit.
That came up in our recent episode too, where we were recording, I think, a frog deck, and like literally I said out loud before it even happened, I was like, oh, we have a Dyna, and I think either you or someone said like, what could he do here? And I was like, well, probably summon Junk Synchron. And a guy literally went summon Junk Synchron attack over to Fossildyna. So it does matter. His stats are good for what it's worth. But yeah, he just adds a third layer to the deck where the deck now reliably synchros, and that's a big fucking deal. Okay, so that's like the Frog Hero Monarch and how it has gotten a lot better. And I want to play that deck a little bit more. I want to actually explore it a little bit more.
I'm getting excited talking about it.
I know, because remember when we played it? We played it, and that episode is actually episode 10 of the Master People, so it's not up on our Patreon yet. We're up to episode 9. But episode 10, which you guys will see eventually if you're on our Patreon, we play with the new Frog Hero Monarch deck using all these cards, Junk Synchron, Malicious Edge, stuff like that. And we get some really good games in. But more importantly, we end up playing against Silch's Ruin, who is like one of the best Edison players because he's done really well last year in like a lot of the RBET tournaments. He's primarily known for playing Diva Hero and playing like the Zombie Hero and stuff like that. So really good player. We ended up playing against him. And despite the fact that that guy literally draws fucking absolutely unreal every single game, he draws raw Stratos without playing Rhoda, like every game. Like he just draws Stratos, which if you're playing a hero deck and you always see Stratos, you're going to have a good tournament. So by default, the fact that he always draws Stratos is insane. So
we started every game off the back foot.
Yeah, every game was just
much.
like every game was wild. And then he also draws OTK hands every game, which is funny because it's like always consists of Dark Arm, which is a one of. Stratos also is a one of. I think that when we watched a replay, we saw him play Allure with a dead hand, and Allure literally drew Stratos Dark Arm, right? That happened, right?
I don't remember exactly, but like it sounds broken, so I'm gonna say yes because he was definitely drawing like a god.
But this is recorded in video, and I was.
I'll guarantee you that you're right though.
I was
that's broken, and he was playing broken.
Okay, I was asking as a rhetorical question to be honest, because I'll never forget when watching the replay and seeing his hand go Allure of Darkness, Stratos Dark Arm, like that.
Oh, you know what? Now I remember. That was broken.
And I was just like, oh, okay. But yeah, so we ended up playing a match, and I was like, oh, this is cool because this guy's actually good. So I get to really see how well this deck performs. And it performed really well. Like we both drew ignorant, broken ass cards all 3 games, and we pulled it out. We ended up winning. But like it made me really respect the deck a lot more because I think at one point he goes for an OTK game 3 and we gores, and then we like popped off on the, you know, the return, but like double Miracle Fusion and all this crazy brain control, all this crazy shit. It was wild. But yeah, the game, that deck is really good, and it just shows that the decks can keep evolving, which I really, really like, because I just did not have high expectations for the decks continuing to evolve to where they are now. So somehow we still haven't quite talked about Lightsworn Fairy because I keep getting sidetracked with other decks, but the Lightsworn Fairy deck plays triple Christia, double JD, triple Solar Purity and Light, triple Herald of Orange Light, and then it just plays like the typical Lightsworn spell card. So Solar Recharge, Charge the Light Brigade, 2 copies of Gold Sarcophagus, and I think that is pretty much it. It literally doesn't even play Heavy Storm. It doesn't play Giant Trinate. It doesn't play Cold Wave. It just plays like triple Lila to deal with back row. And you also don't know that they're not playing Heavy Storm. So one of the cool things about that is the guy who made that, whoever made that deck is really smart. And they're also a really good deck builder. And I say that because there's this phenomenon that goes on in old Yu-Gi-Oh! Where the graveyard is such an information leak that it leads to people, you know, playing differently. For example, if I see that your Mirror Force is in the graveyard, I know that I can keep my monsters in attack mode and I can be very aggressive. If I see Torrential in the graveyard, I know that I can keep summoning monsters because you don't have Torrential, right? This is common sense. This is not like some groundbreaking information. But where it gets tricky and where it gets really cool to me is that a deck that mills itself and doesn't main deck Heavy Storm, do you know what happens to a person that's playing against it, but they don't know that fact? So imagine you're playing against a Lightsworn player and they have 10 cards left in deck, and you don't see Heavy Storm in their graveyard.
That's the exact situation I was going to mention. I'm not setting a single fucking card in that spot.
Yeah, like you can only set one. You're going to set one. You have to set at least one, but you're never going to set more than one, right? So the psychology is he plays triple Lila, and that makes people think, okay, they don't know that he's not playing heavy. They're going to frantically never see Heavy Storm in the graveyard. They'll never see it because it's not in the main deck. So when he's milling his deck and it's going really fast, and it's like, okay, there's only like 7 cards left in the deck. Where the fuck is Heavy? You get so scared that you're like, I can't. He's going to eventually draw it, or you think he already has it. And it literally is psychological warfare. And I love that about the deck because when you're playing regular Lightsworn that plays like Heavy Storm and Giant Trinity and Cold Wave, when people see those cards in the graveyard, what's the first thing you do? You go, I'm setting everything. Like if I'm playing Glabbeast and my opponent's Heavy Storm gets milled turn 1 because they play Charge the Light Brigade and I see that, I'm like, oh, well, fuck you. Summon Laquari, set 5. Like literally that. No fear. What are you going to do? You better have Decree or something because if you don't, the game's just actually over. So that deck is really strong. Now, obviously, it gets slightly different because now people know the deck list and they know that Heavy Storm is in a side deck. So now you can do cool things like, well, I'll just main deck Heavy Storm because now people might be onto the idea that, oh, he doesn't play Heavy Storm, and then they think that they can just set their back row freely and they get Heavy Stormed out the game 1, and it's like, yeah, I actually do main deck the Heavy Storm. So it's really cool that deck lists matter. Like that's kind of the point of of what I'm saying here is that the psychology of the deck list, it matters so much. It's like if you don't main deck Mirror Force in your deck, right? Because like Mirror Force actually isn't that good in Edison format. A lot of people just play it because they feel like it's a staple, and that whole mindset just needs to stop, because that kind of like stymies deck building in general. But Mirror Force is a card that not only is it not that good, but it also has a really big problem when it's in the graveyard. And when you don't main deck Mirror Force and you just play Deep Prisons instead, because Deep Prison is actually just way better, and like 90% of scenarios, I'd rather just have Deep Prison. Like, the only time I actually really, really, really like Mirror Force is when I'm playing against somebody who's awful, or I have a Stardust Dragon on the field. If I have a Stardust Dragon, Mirror Force is great. If I don't have a Stardust Dragon, Mirror Force is just like a really mediocre version of Deep Prison, because most people are not going to actually give you the value that you want out of Mirror Force. Like, it's very rare that you get to Mirror Force more than one monster and it be like two actual monsters that are going to make it a +1, right? Like, it's not a Stratos, not a Sangan, not a Goblin Zombie, not a Shore or something that already got its effect off or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, Mirror Force typically doesn't really hit too hard, whereas Deep Prison is like really good. But the psychology there is that if your deck doesn't play Mirror Force at all, your opponent the entire game is going to be looking for Mirror Force. Every time they check your graveyard, they're going to be like, oh, he still doesn't use Mirror Force. And that's because almost everyone plays Mirror Force. Same thing with Torrential Tribute. Like, the cool thing is a lot of Blackwing decks don't play Torrential, but that can be used in a psychological way too, because if you study Edison format, if you go on edisonformat.com, you look at most of the list of Blackwings, you know, okay, this deck typically doesn't play Torrential. So you feel like, oh, I can actually summon multiple monsters and they won't get punished. And then people start playing Torrential and Blackwings, and it, so you see where it's going. It's like circular. It's
the best shit there too is when you have people that like, you have people that go like, okay, Blackwings don't play Torrential, right? So they play against a Blackwing deck and they're playing, and then when their opponent flips Torrential, they go, oh my god, he's so fucking bad. He put a random Torrential in his deck. And this now throws you off, because you're saying your opponent's bad because he put random Torrential in his deck and Blackwings don't play Torrential. But like, really, he just like made the call, seeing that somebody would play into that trap. You know what I mean? And so like, that's really cool shit about metagames and them shifting and evolving, and different decks doing different things, and just, it's my favorite thing about metagames, especially unchanging metagames that don't get patched or things get added to
people
them.
Just have to figure out how to adapt.
Yeah, like, I love that. Like, something I wanted to bring up earlier, like about how Blackwings are the best. Then you have, even if the Fairy matchup doesn't straight beat it, the fact that it's strong enough where the Blackwing player has to allocate some of his brain space, some of his side
100%
deck.
100% the matchup is like, it is a very grueling matchup. You have to play basically perfect on both sides, right? So if both people, that's why I said, like, if both people play perfect and everything and they're really good and like they draw evenly, like somebody doesn't just blatantly draw broken. Like, I don't draw Whirlwind Shura and just absolutely dick you out the game. It's going to be a grueling back and forth match. But the fact that it exists, right?
The fact that exists, it makes it so that, once again, it just stretches the side deck space, or like makes it tougher. And so, like you guys already said, it makes it so that, because the Fairy deck becomes live, other decks become more viable. I was thinking when you guys were talking about like Pokemon, when Scizor became king, Heatran was already a played Pokemon, but not as much. But when Scizor became king, at some point people were like, oh, Heatran just stops everything Scizor does. But he has other things that beat him, and then Magnezone, who was like never used, but when Magnezone is out, Steel types can't switch out. And so Magnezone became like a pretty good counter to Scizor. But then that created Magnezone being in the metagame, which shifted the metagame even more. And like, it changes the thought process of the metagame so much, because Scizor was so good that even though Magnezone existed, people still wanted to play Scizor. But they just had to change the way they team built to like deal with Magnezone, and just change all of this different shit. Like, it was, so Magnezone existing didn't stop Scizor. It just made it so Scizor players had to change and be a bit smarter, which is like akin to what Blackwings have to do.
Yeah. That's 100% true. I actually said that I think that it's time that Blackwing players need to all be main decking Torrential. For not just the fact that most people get aggressive when they see what you're playing, they just assume that you don't play it, but also because Consecrated Light is ending up in the side deck of everything, and it's really obnoxious, and Torrential's just one more out to that card, because people, once they set up their Consecrated, they feel free to just start summoning anything.
Yeah.
Like, I got Consecrated against Gladbeast. Like, I was playing Blackwings and I won game 1, and in game 2, this fucker summoned Consecrated Light on me, like turn 1, with playing Gladbeast.
That's something else that's cool about Edison is that Consecrated Light is a viable card because the card still exists, right?
Yeah.
And dark is like the best attribute. But for example, where Yu-Gi-Oh is now, like you can't play Consecrated Light. You know what I mean? And so the point is, I remember when
more OTKU.
when we first got into Edison, we were talking about Consecrated Light because we were like, we might need to play this for like these Dark Dragon bullshit, and like all of that nonsense. But then it turns out that people still need to play Consecrated Light, but it's just because of regular Black Wings.
Yeah, like it's not even about the fucking Nolaris deck or anything like that. It's actually because Black Wings simply exist. They just breathe, and here goes Consecrated Light. Like, all right, here I am. But yeah, Consecrated is ending up in the side deck of every deck. And that is obnoxious. As a Blackwing player, that is just very obnoxious to deal with. So obviously the Blackwing players are smart. We're metagaming. We're figuring things out. Blackwing players typically already side stuff like Pulsadina. I talked to Hydro Pump because he's playing in the Peak of the Beak tournament, and he was siding Thunder King. And we had a whole discussion about Thunder King because I don't really agree with Thunder King because I just think Blackwings have like too many normal summons already.
We just talked about how that's a vanilla monster.
We actually did. Yeah, not even kidding. We actually did. I personally don't like Thunder King.
I don't know what Thunder King does against Blizzard. I know it doesn't negate special summons.
Well, he doesn't. Yeah, he played exactly. That's the He plays. He's playing Thunder King against X-Sabers, and I get the logic kind of, but Dark Soul doesn't exist. So the searching that they do is not this format. Like when Dark Soul comes out. So for people who don't know, like Dark Soul comes out right after Edison format, and it is essentially it is Sangan for X-Sabers, but it's on the end phase. Like you kill it, it doesn't activate immediately like Sangan, but on the end phase, they get to add any X-Saber from their deck to their hand, which is fucking broken. It's very broken.
Really broken.
And Thunder King becomes really good against X-Sabers at that point. But like right now, when you attack their face down monster, or if you even attack at all, their monsters are just Ember's Blades, Giant Rats, and like Gravekeeper Spy. So in my head, like Thunder King is actually not very good. But where Thunder King is good, kind of the point of this is that the Consecrated thing, because you don't know if the X-Saber player is going to side that Consecrated or not. And I almost feel like Blackwings are in such a weird place right now where you kind of have to take into consideration that Consecrated Light might come in against you no matter what you're playing against. Like you could be playing against Dragon Turbo, and there is a chance. I don't even know how. There is a fucking
they
chance.
Normal summon Consecrated, and then they start beating you down with Drago.
And like that could that could actually be fucking scary, by the way. Like that would because and the reason why I say that, I lost a game last week at locals, just a game. I went undefeated the whole fucking tournament. Literally didn't drop a game except to Glad Beast Game 2, who summoned Consecrated Light, and I eventually started losing to the Glad Beasts are not dark. Like none of them are dark. The only one that's actually dark, and it's kind of funny, is the Contact Fusion Gizaris, which is the best Glad Beast, but you don't need that against me when I can't even fucking play the game. So I ended up losing a game to it, and then game 3, I got to go first again, and it just was not even close. Like, it just wasn't even close. But I feel like Blackwings are at a weird spot, and I'm still trying to figure this out too. Like, what do I want to do when I feel like their deck is going to side and Consecrate it? Like, do I want to put in Dyna every game? Do I want to put in Cyber Dragon every game? Right? Because Cyber Dragon's kind of like losing a bit of its popularity. But at the same time, I'm looking at Cyber Dragon now, like, okay, this card doesn't take my normal summon, which is really good. And it also is a light monster that can beat over a lot of the decks that saw Consecrated. Like, if I drew Cyber Dragon and they didn't have Consecrated, Cyber Dragon is just a good card anyway against a lot of these decks. Like, he'd be good against like, a set Spy. He'd be good against, you know what I mean? Like, so he's good in general.
I feel like people used to use Cyber Dragon just simply to deal with machine decks.
Yes.
And obviously, as time is going on, machine decks have become less and less of a threat. But I think that the value of Cyber Dragon still exists, where it's like his summon, now it's not to Contact Fuse, but now it's just like, all right, I beat that card, and now your deck's free again.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time as well is like not even beating over a monster. Like Cyber Dragon kind of like almost acts as like a pseudo MST. Like he's just going to be like, I want to eat back row. Like I don't want to play with any of my cards because they're all vulnerable to like expected back row that you have right now. So I'm just going to go Cyber attack, and like you can bottomless, you can deep prison. Like this guy was free. I'm not going to worry about him.
Yeah, that's actually true. Cyber Dragon does bait out a lot of back row, which is really, really good, especially for Blackwings.
He's also a good synchro monster. Like, you just make synchros with him.
Yeah, you can tribute for Kaias. He does a lot. So Cyber Dragon is like one of the things that I think will, for people who have taken Cyber Dragon out of their side deck, I think that card can come back in. And it's really good to side against pretty much every deck that you feel like may side Consecrated against you. Like if I'm playing against Glad Beast, I'm probably siding Cyber Dragon anyway, right? So if they bring in Consecrated, it's awkward for them. If I draw my Cyber Dragon, I just beat over your Consecrated for free. And your Glad Beast can't beat my Cyber Dragon, so you're in a really awkward spot in that case.
It's a good point. It's a really good point.
Yeah, so I think
I never really thought of it that way.
Yeah, because he's not a normal summon. And I don't like... So my biggest gripe with Thunder King, again, is that it's a normal summon. And I just feel like Black Wings is already flooded with those. So every time I have to choose between summoning Shura or summoning Sirocco and summoning Thunder King, I just... it's too many normal summons. I hate it.
We had that conversation about Greffer. Like, Greffer does broken things in Black Wings, but I remember you were saying it's like, well, like more than half of the time, if I have to summon Greffer, like that's my play, I'm annoyed because I'd rather summon a Blackwing.
Yes, but Greffer also, like, I defend him at the same time because Greffer does something that pretty much nothing else does, and that is just straight up doing 4,000 damage to your opponent. Like,
That's true.
It is crazy how often your opponent will be open and Greffer will just, especially like, so Greffer in the beginning of the game is not as crazy because usually people have the most resources they do have the most resources in the beginning of the game, and they could deal with the 2300 vanilla monster that you summon off of Greffer with Vayu and all that, right? But I noticed that Greffer, like mid-game when we're trying to grind it out, and I'm just like, summon Greffer, priority ditch Vayu, that shit, the mid-game Greffers, where now it's 4,000 monsters, just 4,000 worth of damage just appeared on the field, bursted. Like, I just bursted out 4,000 damage out of nowhere. It is like Go ahead.
He also just helps you make Dark Arm turn 1, like that one episode we did.
Yes, we did summon Dark Arm turn 1. He also sets up a lot of things. So he's not terrible, but his other problem is that he's 1,700, which is a really awkward number to be because you get beat up by opposing Shuras and you get beat up by Dimensional Alchemist and like pretty much everything. Stratos beats him up. So there's a lot of cards that beat up Greffer. So he's like a liability on the field, which does suck about him. But for the most part, like, he does have this really cool thing where you can just, out of nowhere, your opponent's at like 5,000 and some change, and you're like, oh, well, I already have a guy out. Normal summon Greffer, pitch, and you're dead. And that is just game. But yeah, Consecrated Light is a problem. And I am glad that almost everyone is signing it. And that just tells me that it kind of like vindicates me in the whole sense of how I feel about Black Wings being the best deck. Like, when I see that Glad Beasts are signing Consecrated Light, I just feel like I'm right. Like, y'all can debate your grandmom, but once you start citing Consecrated Light in your fucking Glad Beast deck,
non-searchable normal monster.
Yes, non-searchable monster that you have to put on the field and not summon a Glad Beast. Once you start doing that, like, I've attacked a plant player, like a guy was playing Quick Draw Dandy, and he literally Consecrated Lighted me, and I'm like, okay, like it's to the point now where everyone has acknowledged it, everyone's accepted it, and so anyone saying otherwise, I just feel like you're being delusional and you're trying to cope. You're just trying to cope, and it's okay.
You know what's interesting as well? There's a dynamic in competitive games in general where, like, there's always that thing where it's like, this is the best deck. And like, you always have like the crowd, which is generally considered like casual nature. It's just like, oh, I don't play that. That deck is whack. It's lame. But the grand majority of people are still playing like the best thing, right?
Yes.
It feels like in Edison format, it's kind of the reverse. Like, people just kind of don't want to play Black Wings. Like, when, like you said, like, offline Yu-Gi-Oh is so much different.
It is.
Than online. It's like, you get the Blackwing Brigade there, but you know, when we went to the regional, I didn't play against a single Blackwing player.
But
you. And I knew you were playing Blackwing, so it's like, that wasn't surprising.
Yeah, I don't think anyone else in the tournament was playing Blackwing.
I played against fucking Yumi Diva Hero.
Yep. And you played against Nalaris.
Hey man. Umi makes their monster stronger, all right?
I played against Glad Beast, and then I played against Quick Draw Dandy Warrior. So, yeah, a lot, and that's the thing. Like, going all the way back to the very beginning of this episode, most people just feel like they can play anything, and I'm happy that people feel that way.
Yep.
Do I believe it's actually that way? No, I think that you should not be playing most decks. So, let me give a little quick tier list thing of like how I feel. Then I want to talk about the Lightsworn Fairy deck for like the 8th time I'm trying to get to this deck. Okay, so my tier list now, and I'll probably do an actual tier list update video on our YouTube channel. So check out the IMNerd Podcast YouTube channel if you're listening to this. Okay. Black Wings is S tier, obviously. So it's at the top of, the tier list. And it's S tier, and it's the first thing in S tier. And then I also have the new Lightsworn Fairy deck. I consider that S tier. I've played that deck a lot in these last 2 months, and that deck is fucking broken. I'm going to talk about it right after this. I think the other decks that are S tier I think Zombies is an Zombies is an S tier deck because it does something that really no other deck does, which is just straight up kill you at 8,000. Like Zombies can literally 8,000 you, and it's pretty consistent in how it does it. It also just plays natural anti-meta cards like Book of Life, which I think is really good. And it's just a strong deck. Like honestly, Zombies puts you in such an awkward position where I keep asking myself, should I attack their face down monster? Should I not attack their face down monster? Because if their face down monster is Goblin Zombie, you don't want it to be on the field. Because then it leads to Caius, it leads to Diva, it leads to OTKs. But if their face down monster is fucking Mystic Tomato or Pyramid Turtle, then you don't want to attack it because you don't want it to get like Malicious or Goblin Zombie, and then you have to pass with Malicious or Goblin Zombie on their field, and then you get Diva or Caius. So you see where I'm going? So Zombies is a really good deck, and I have it S tier as well. So that's Blackwing, Lightsworn Fairy, Zombies. And I also think that the Frog Hero, Monarch, Junk Synchron deck, whatever the hell that is, I think that deck is also S tier. And I want to play with that some more. So that's probably going to be like what I tamper with a little bit now. And then I think that like me, because I'm really stubborn about this, I genuinely believe that the Hero Stun deck, the one that doesn't play Miracle Fusion, I really think that deck is S tier. Like I actually factually do. And most people don't play it. In fact, almost no one plays it. But I think it's really good. We actually played it the other night, and we didn't lose a single game. Like, it's kind of crazy.
It was a breeze.
Like, not a game. The deck is really, really, really good. So, those are like my S tier decks. And then I pretty much have everything else is like, you know, they could be a tier under. But I think like S tier, when I think about decks that, the way I see it, those are the decks that I just named that I kind of don't want to play against too much in tournament. Like, I know for a fact, I don't want to play against a really good Lightsworn Fairy player. I don't want to play against a really good Hero Frog player. And honestly, even a competent zombie player is scary because I could just die. Like I'm not allowed to just open no traps. I actually played at one of the side events in Pasadena. I played against, in the finals of one of the side events, a zombie player. And there was a game where I opened up 0 traps. My hand was all monsters. And like, I think I might have had either Brain Control or Heavy Storm or something like that. And he fucking OTK'd me so quick. Like he just absolutely OTK'd me. It was like summon Armageddonite, send the guy to the grave, like send Plague to the grave, and then he just like Book of Life me and started doing all these crazy plays. And next thing I know, I was staring down a Yugioh, a Brionic, and something else, and he just attacked my game. And I felt so annoyed because my hand was actually broken. Like when you look at my hand, it was actually crazy what my hand was if I got to play the game. But that deck can just invalidate that. And that's why Zombies is really strong, on top of just the fact that, again, it plays like anti-meta cards, and it's just a scary deck.
So go ahead. Real quick, before you go on to if you even do A tier, what's cool about what you just said is, like, you just said that you think Blackwing is the best deck, no contest. But in S tier, I think you named 5 decks that are S tier.
I did. I really did.
And 5. If at this moment in time in the meta, even if 5 is a lot less than the 20 decks that were promised to you in Edison format. Yeah. Edison format is promised that there's 20 playable decks. 5 playable decks is more than like almost any format of Yu-Gi-Oh! Yeah. Like the fact that 5 decks are playable, even before you get to A tier, if there's 5 truly S tier decks, like that's still a really healthy format with a lot of deck variety.
And I will say this, I could add a 6 deck to it because Lightsworn Fairy is not the same as Fairy. So I could theoretically argue for Fairy. But I think that Fairy is more dependent than the other decks are. So Fairy is dependent on if Blackwings is represented and you run into it. Fairies is S tier if you're going to play against a lot of Blackwings, right? If you do not play against a lot of Blackwings, Fairy actually loses a lot of its value, intrinsic value, because it's not really that good against a lot of the other weird decks. Like its matchup spread is kind of linear, which is the one thing I don't like about it. Like it's good against anti-meta bullshit. In the sense that like it's good against the Hero Beat decks and Hero Stun, which is funny because it got to play against in the finals of RBET Rulers. The deck that it went against in the finals was Hero Beat, the one that plays Miracle Fusion and Diva and all that. And it just beats that matchup. That is actually an easy clap matchup. So if that deck is well represented and if Blackwings are well represented, then Fairies becomes an S tier deck in that bracket in that case. But if you play in a format that or in a tournament that has a lot of frogs and people playing shit like Glad Beast and all of that, then your tournament is not going well. Like I do not think that Fairies does very well against those kind of decks. So it's really interesting to think about how swingy that one is. Whereas the other 5 that I named, I don't give a fuck what my bracket is with Blackwings. I don't really care what my bracket is with Lightsworn Fairy because that deck is so ignorant that it can just like absolutely steal games better than Dragon Turbo does. Zombies
creates
also
a lot of non-games.
Yep, Zombies also does the same thing where it doesn't really like Zombie doesn't care about its matchups. Like I don't even know what a bad like the worst matchup that Zombies have in my opinion is Blackwings, but like it isn't so bad that it can't win. Like it can absolutely beat the Blackwing deck. So
that's the interesting, and we'll finally get to that Christia Fairy deck after this. But that's the interesting thing. Like we acknowledge like Frazier and like some of our friend group Blackwing's best deck. But the other decks that are like definitely S tier, like in that range, Edison format in general, like Frazier says it pretty often. Like I don't know how strongly he feels about it with Blackwings. Probably not as much because Whirlwind and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But in general, like Edison formats decks in terms of consistency is really poor. It's not like modern tier, like modern era level of like there's not prosperity, there's no duality. Like you can brick with a lot of different decks. Like with Blackwings, like Frazier said, drew no traps. He had no interactions with zombies, and if you can't interact with a zombie turn, you're dying.
Yeah, you actually will die. Like and it's interesting to think about because even my hand that I had, I even said like that hand was broken. I just died. If he was playing something else that doesn't kill you literally, like I would actually probably have just won that game. My hand was like Blizzard, Shura, Double Kalute, Sirocco Bora, something like that, with a heavy storm off the top. So like my hand's actually like wild. Like when you think like that is fucking crazy, but he ended up just going, well, you don't have any traps. I'm not sure why you don't have any traps, but you don't have any traps. So
yeah, that's just the thing with Edison format is that like kind of a soft way of saying it, but most of the decks are really shitty in their consistency because they can just draw hands where like they're not really playing to their end goal. So they kind of have these extremes where like, if you draw all monsters against zombies, you're getting OTK'd. Like there's nothing you can do about it. If you draw no traps against Glad Beast, like, well, go to the next game because once Glad Beast starts going, like you're not going to stop them, kind of thing. So
yeah, and frogs also do really well against like if you just draw a bunch of traps against frogs, it's not good. Like traps against like you do like every time Caius goes banish a monster and you go bottomless, the frog player is happy with that exchange every time.
Yeah, that is a
every time,
sweet situation.
It's a +1 every time because they're like bring back Treeborn Frog, tribute for Caius, target your guy. You're like bottomless. Okay, so you lost your guy and you're bottomless, and I just lost Caius. Next turn, I do it. I go summit Dastalos. Dastalos rip a card out your hand, and you go when I go attack, you go Deep Prison. So now you lost a card out your hand, and you lost Deep Prison, and all again, I just lost Dastalos +1 again. So like Monarchs love playing against trap cards. And whereas Monarchs can lose, in the games where I usually beat Monarchs pretty bad, is where it's usually games 2 and 3 because they have really ignorant side deck cards against them. Like pulling the rug is really hardcore because it usually ends their turn, which is why it's really important that you do have layers to your deck with the Miracle Fusions and stuff like that. But usually their turn ends when you pulling the rug them. Their turn usually ends, and the game ends when you mask or restrict them. And so like that game, it has a really strong game 1, but then it has like a hardcore game 2 where it's awkward. And if I draw a lot of monsters, I'll just rush you down because I'm not really trying to play around Gores when you're playing frogs. I'm not really trying to play around Trag and all that. Like I'm just here to attack you because at the end of the day, if the game goes too long, you'll just eventually Monarch train me, and nobody wants to deal with that nonsense. So it's best to get it over with as quickly as possible. But yeah, all of the 5 decks that I named are pretty independent of bracket. I feel like, in my opinion, like they don't really care about bracket too much. And then the Fairy deck is just like, I want to play against Blackwing. I want to play against Hero Beat. I do not want to play against like random bullshit. Like I played against Lightsworn when I played Fairies, and that is not a good matchup. Like actual Lightsworn, just like Beckonings and JD and all that stuff, and Lumina Garoth and trying to just get there like that. That matchup felt so bad. Like it just felt so bad. And then I started playing Lightsworn for a little bit at locals, and my friend was playing the Fairy deck. And we were just test playing, and he was just getting clapped. Like he was just like, I can't deal with this. Like you get too much time, is what he was saying. Like you just have so much time because I can't really aggress you too much. Like the Fairy deck, outside of Christie, it doesn't have some crazy push. Like, okay, you have a Shining Angel. Next turn, you summon DD War Lady. That's not doing it. Like, that's just not like Lightsworn is just like, okay, I'm going to continue to mill my deck, and then eventually I'm going to flip it back.
Yeah, because at some point, it's like, it's not worried about like clearing your monsters and like dueling with you. It's like, well, the game is, we're playing throughout the game. The game's not ending, quickly enough in your favor. I'm still milling cards every single turn. Eventually, you're going to deal with the best boss monster because it just wipes everything.
Okay, so let's talk about the better Lightsworn deck. So Lightsworn, honestly, if I'm being blunt here, Lightsworn, like regular pure Lightsworn is shit. And really you have no reason why, especially now. So you know better, you do better, right? They say when you know better, you do better. I feel like now that the Christia Lightsworn deck is like officially a deck. It has a really good deck list in my opinion and everything like that. And sure, you could like tweak it and work on it. You could put Heavy Storm in the main deck if you want or whatever, and say fuck the psychology of not maining it. That deck, I don't want to play against in a tournament. So that is one of the main ways that I can tell if something is good or not. When I say, if I sit down, right, and I don't really care who my opponent is. Like I don't really care like if they're, oh, this guy's like YCS champion or top a bunch of times. I don't care. If they're playing that deck, I don't care who it is. I am genuinely afraid. I played against it last Thursday, round 2 of locals. And the guy who was playing it, he is relatively new to Yu-Gi-Oh! Like he pretty much, like we talk about, I give him advice all the time. He asks me for deck lists and stuff like that. So he's a relatively new Yu-Gi-Oh! Player, or like he's someone who doesn't play super competitive like I have with most of my life. And we played round 2 and he won a die roll. I believe his turn 1 was just like set up monster and pass. And I remember on turn 2, his second turn, after I made whatever play I made turn 1, he summoned Christia turn 2. Okay? So Christia came out turn 2. And it just is exactly the reason why I do not want to play against that deck in tournament. Because that is just, and it was a real Christia. It wasn't like he called it or haunted it. It wasn't like he tributed his hamster and Raikou to summon it. He literally, turn 1, I think he went like charge for Raikou, blatantly set the Raikou. The Raikou probably got attacked by my Bora or some shit. I think it was Bora. And like he took 1600 and he drew for turn and was like, oh, look at that. That is forfeit. Summon Christia. And I was like, wow, like that is so fucking gay. I'm about to actually get clapped here. And the weirdest thing is, I ended up 2-0ing him. And I kept saying to myself, because Silverman was watching, and me and Silverman just looked at each other after I won. So I was like, I feel like I should have lost. And Silverman was like 100%. He's like, he was like, he had you, like, basically Silverman saying, if I was sitting in that seat, you would have been dead as shit. Like, you were not getting out of that. And I believe it. Like, I 100% believe it, because obviously we're not all created equal as far as Yu-Gi-Oh goes. Silverman and me have both played Yu-Gi-Oh for a lot. So it's not like to disrespect the guy who was playing the deck. It's more so to just say that, like, we're built different. And when you have opportunities like that, and it's a really good player, it's just, the game's over. Like, it is just over. I kind of saw my defeat when he summoned it, and I think that it could have been as simple as he got back the wrong card. Like, I'm pretty sure he got back Herald of Orange Light when he should have got back Honest, and what I ended up doing was going Summon Shura, attack over Christia, Kalut, and he did not have a second fairy to stop it, and then I just got Vayu, so Christia is now on the top of the deck. I ended up getting Vayu, I made a Catastor, and then I think that turn I had drawn like Oppression or some shit, or Solemn or something. So when he summoned the Christia again, I was just like, Oppression now. And I have Catastor up, and the game just fell apart. Something like that. Like, I don't remember the exact logistics of it, but he ended up losing in the game 2. I ended up Dark Arming him, and he lost, which is like really fortunate. I drew Dark Arm. My hand wasn't very good, but then I literally top deck Dark Arm, and my hand already had Gruffer Shura. And I was like, well, I have 1 Dark Monster in the grave. Gruffer plus Shura equals 3 Dark Monsters. And the monster that was in the grave, I think, was actually Sirocco. So, like, I was like, summon Gruffer, pitch Shura, send Value, special Dark Arm, anything? He was like, nope. So I have now Gruffer, Dark Arm, I pop his field, then I go activate Value, banish Sirocco, banish Value, summon 2300 guys. So now he is like 17, 23, which is 4,000 plus 28, 6,800 right there. And he had already taken damage earlier. He just died out of nowhere, like literally out of nowhere. And I was like, whoo, thank God. Because that matchup is fucking scary as shit. I never want to play against that deck. I'm so terrified of it every single time. And I just think, so when I play it, there's so many games that I just feel like are non-games. Like, I love that term that we've recently been using, and I've heard it on like other people's YouTube channels and stuff like that. But those non-games they're not really a good thing. Like, even when I'm doing it, and it feels cool to resolve Christia. Like, me and McCabe talked about this last week. It's like, Christia is one of the best cards to resolve in Edison format. Like, just summoning her, like, oh, I have exactly 4. And then you summon her, you get back a guy. It feels amazing. And then you just know
you're in a really strong position.
You're in a really strong position, and you know that when she dies, she just goes back to the top of my deck. She's so fucking good. I keep saying she, even though Christie is actually a guy. But like you guys get the point. Like Christia is just so.
It's 2023. She can be whatever she wants.
That's true.
That is true.
They, them, he, she. Christia can identify.
Listen, if you want to create a non-game, play Lightsworn Fairies against zombies, because I've learned that is
matchup's not winnable, basically.
Yeah, the matchups. I legitimately think the matchup's not winnable. I think it's like legitimately
90-10.
Yeah, it's really bad. It's really bad.
If your Lightsworn Fairy opponent is competent, and you're playing zombies, I think that it is an abysmal matchup. And I don't really, because Stengo and I basically played like 10 games, but like we kind of just played face up. So it wasn't like I was playing against somebody who's just not as skilled as me or whatever. It's like, no, if I had your hand and I was in your shoes,
I showed him. I was just like, well, this is what happened. You summoned Christia too fast, and none of my cards do anything now.
And he shows me his hand. I'm like, well, I can't do anything with that either. Like, I can't make like, listen. I said I was Jesus, not a miracle worker. Like, what are we doing here, right? Like,
yeah.
So the deck is really, really good. It's really fast too. Like some games, it just plays way faster than other games, and then some games it just wins by something as stupid as they attack your hamster, and that's just too much because then they go hamster get Ryko flip, pop your back row, then tribute for Celestia, and they just mill 7 cards. And the game is just ending right there. Right?
And Ryko tribute for Celestia is always a fun thing to do. Like
yes.
the amount of cards, the amount of cards that destroys is insane.
Yes, it clears the way for Christia. It's also a reason why the deck doesn't play Heavy Storm, because it plays like double Celestia, as I'm saying. But yeah, it plays double Celestia. So it like clears the way for Christia, it clears the way for JD. And Beckoning Light in that deck, so that deck has the strongest Beckoning Light, which is why I think that actual pure Lightsworn is terrible. Because like all
it's going to get is JD and shit. Like all the other things that it's getting, it's just like get back Lumina. Like you don't even know if that Lumina is going through. You got to drop a card. It's all this other stuff that like you're kind of being wishful on. Like JD raw off of the Beckoning is like strong just because it's like, all right, well, special JD for free if it rocks out. Like I'll wipe the field.
The only thing you're looking for in base Lightsworn is JD and Honest.
Yep.
Off of Beckoning.
And a lot of times when you play with or against Lightsworn, like pure Lightsworn Edison format, because they only have 1 Lumina, 1 Charge of the Light Brigade, they sometimes just don't even see JD. Like JD's at 2, and there are times when people have to Beckoning Light just to live. Like they got to go Beckoning Light on my attack to get back Honest, and like the rest of their cards they get back aren't even impactful. It's like, okay, so you got back a Jane, an Honest, and an Aaron. Cool. Okay, so I'll take some damage off of the Honest, and then like I'm fine because there's no JD in sight. Whereas the Lightsworn Fairy Christia deck, when that shit goes Beckoning, first of all, there are multiple things happening. They're manipulating their graveyard to get the 4 fairies, but also to get the 4 different names for Lightsworn JD as well. And the boss monsters just start raining down, as well as low key Soul of Purity and Light being just a triplicate in the deck is really good because you can do like, oh, well, there's no JD in sight, so I don't need to worry about Lightsworn. So I can banish the Lightsworn monsters because there's no JD in my hand right now, and I'm not expecting to draw one. So I'll banish the Lightsworn monsters, summon Soul Purity and Light, and then I'll summon Herald of Orange Light, Synchro, make a guy, and then now I have 4 fairies because I just put 2 new fairies in the graveyard, and I didn't banish any fairies by summoning her. I banished Lightsworn monsters. So like that is a common thing that happens. The inverse also happens often, where you have JD and there's no Christias, so you start banishing the fucking fairies. You're like, okay, so I'll summon Soul Purity and Light, and this time I'll banish like Honest and Herald of Orange Light, or other Soul Purity Lights that got banished and stuff like that, or got milled, I should say. And you'll summon it and be like, I'm keeping my Lightsworns because I have JD in my hand. And now it's so that card strangely just like really does a lot for the deck. But not only that, it's also just a 2000. Yeah, it's not 2000. It's a 2000 beater. It's a 2000 beater, and when you play against decks like Glad Beast, Hero Beat, that's relevant. Like they have to use a card to deal with that.
Yeah. I mean, it also has, it's maybe not relevant in every situation, maybe against like Cyber Dragon and like Wolf and stuff like that. But it does have kind of like, I guess you could say floodgate effect where like all your monsters are 300 smaller. Yeah. Like that can maybe sometimes come up.
Yeah. It just has like a continuous little nerf to everybody's attack.
The thing that sounds cool about the Fairy Lightsworn deck, and it's the same thing that sounds like what happened to Monarchs, where it's basically just as the format improved, more layers got added to the decks. Because Lightsworn decks don't have layers. Like Lightsworn decks are just like, I hope I get JD. Gold
that's
Sark.
Always been the plan. That's always been their plan.
But now this has added more layers to it, where it's like you can because when Lightsworns got stripped of like their 3 charges and all the other bullshit, like
Lumina, Necrogardeners and all that,
it became so much less consistent. Yeah, Necro Garden went to 1. Anyway, they became less consistent, and this adds consistent to the deck by giving it more play options. Same with Monarchs.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
It also plays no wolves, so I just wanted to add that in there when you were talking.
Yeah, and that's a huge consideration because Wolf is once again Lightsworn he's similar to Lightsworn's similar to Dragon Turbo, in that it really is just a lottery deck. It's like, I hope I don't draw Wolf, but if I mill Wolf, you're dead.
Yes.
Like,
yeah, and Lightsworn Fairy deck, and on the contrary, when it mills, it doesn't care about its mills too much, as in the sense of like, oh, I need to mill specifically for Lightsworn names. It's like, no, I can actually mill a Lightsworn, but I can also just mill actual fairies, and I only play those 2 types. So when I'm milling, something is becoming live, which is one of the best. That is one of the best feelings. It takes off so much anxiety. When I was playing, like, there was a period where I was trying to make Lightsworn happen, and like, just stop trying to make fetch happen. I was trying so hard to make Lightsworn happen, and it just wasn't working. And it's because my entire game plan was I have to get the JD, and I have to either Monster Reincarnation it or Beckoning Light it. And if I don't do that, my deck blows. Whereas when I played the Lightsworn Fairy deck, when I'm milling on the end phase, I'm not sitting there like frantic, hoping to God. They're like, oh my God, please mill 4 different names. Please mill 4 different names. I'm like, okay, there's an Honest, there's a Herald of Orange Light, there's a Lila, there's a Raikou. And I'm really, really happy about that, because that's just so many things becoming closer to being live, or actually becoming live with my hand.
That's the other thing. Just the addition of another boss monster is like, you don't have to worry. Like, you don't have to Beckoning for JD right away. If like I could just play Christia right now, and then like play around shit. Like, you don't need to, because if you mill your JD now, it's like, okay, now I got to get the thing to get JD back. Yes. Whereas like this opens more options, where it's like, okay, I can play a bit more flexibly and do some other plays without worrying about frantically getting JD back right away.
And what I will say also is that, so it has a really good matchup against decks like Diva Hero. Oh, also, just to complete my tier list thing, every deck that I did not name in my top 5/6 is just the tier below. So Glad Beast, Quick Draw, all those decks, they're just a tier, like Dragon Turbo, all those decks are just a tier below. Anyways, so the Lightsworn Fairy deck,
Crystal Beast,
whatever, they're all just a tier below. Like, you can just, when people say you can play anything, like Summon Cat Good, like all of those decks, they're just all, I feel like, in the same realm of power.
They just haven't had the innovation. Like, all right, to just mention something as well, like Monarch decks, Frog decks, because they kind of go hand in hand with each other. Monarch Frogs and Lightsworns, I guess you could say Lightsworn Fairs, because that's what they are now. They've had the biggest glow up, like, of all the Edison decks, like by far.
Yeah.
Like, Monarchs kind of were just bad, like really bad.
Yeah, they were.
Fairies, they weren't bad, but they didn't do enough to other decks that they were kind of already doing the Blackwings, in terms of like being able to be like, okay, well, I go to, every matchup, and like, I run into GBs, and like I get my Recruiters pop by Marmillo, and like whatever, all this other stuff. But like now with Christia and JD, it's just like, I don't know. I mean, Christia by herself just wins games. Like, sometimes JD's not even required. Sometimes
Christia's not required.
Yeah.
It's interesting because the deck has a really good matchup spread against the best decks.
Yeah. I have a question. Does anybody still play the Vayu Turbo Lightsworn deck?
Yeah, Lightsworn?
Not Vayu Turbo. Vayu Turbo's played. Vayu Turbo Lightsworn is not really played. That's more like a
the side deck one. I mean, the one that sides.
Okay.
The one that
I remember what you're talking about. Yeah,
it topped RBET, so it was a Lightsworn deck, the main deck, and then it sided literally 15 cards to transform it into black, like a Blackwing Vayu Turbo deck.
Yeah, that's a deck I mean.
I have not seen that deck since those two guys both topped that one tournament. I have not seen that top again, and I haven't really seen it. Like, I haven't seen, when I'm watching games or like watching other tournaments and stuff like that, I haven't seen a match where like, oh, game one was this, like Lightsworn, and then next thing you know, it just becomes Vayu Turbo, and you now have dead Light Mirrors in your deck. Because
I wonder if that deck's still viable.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. It was at Ribbit 2. It was back in March of 2022.
That's a long time ago now.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything like that.
What I've
seen more of like a Twilight thing where it's like they kind of just mix and match the same engines in the same deck, which I just think is worse.
Yeah, that's not good. Also, what I will say, Kenny, is that I think that now that deck will need to get modernized to be Lightsworn Fairy game 1, and then it could do the value thing game 2, because I still don't agree with you playing actual Lightsworn game 1 when the Lightsworn Fairy deck is just so much better and scarier. So if you can find a way, because essentially what it plays in the main deck, the deck that you were talking about from RBET2, and that deck was good. I actually remember playing that deck. It's actually what I lost to round 1. I lost to a guy named Tom on a round. I sent the replay to
I remember Tom on the round.
His name was Tom on a round. He actually ended up topping the tournament, but he's not the only one who played the exact same 45 or 55 cards. And so they both like did well with the deck. So I was like, well, not only did he mill broken, but the deck list was nice. And they played well and everything like that. And that deck, like, it just needs to be updated. So it used to play triple wolf, right? And we know the Lightsworn Fairy deck doesn't play wolf. So there may be a way to transform that main deck into the Lightsworn Fairy deck and then have it slide into Value Turbo. And then the question becomes, is that even worth it? Because a lot of times the Lightsworn Fairy deck is so strong that your opponent's only possible answer is Light Mirror, which is the reason why they started it in any way.
It's funny. It might even be worth it too. Like, I could see with how popular Blackwings are, you starting the deck with the Blackwing side, and then when they bring in their Consecrated Lights, all of a sudden you're a Lightsworn deck or a Lightsworn Fairy deck, and it's like, oh shit.
Yeah, it might be possible to actually get it down to a level where it does transform either way, like either starting off Blackwing and becoming the Lightsworn Fairy deck, or starting off Lightsworn Fairy and becoming the Value Turbo deck. But it hasn't been explored yet. Maybe that's some new innovation that we're going to see this year, because that's actually an interesting little like idea, because the Lightsworn deck has gotten updated to where I just think it's strictly better. Like, I just think there's no reason to play regular Lightsworn. Like, Milling Wolf is cool. Summoning Christie is like wild. It's like the Drake meme, where he's like pushing his like summoning, like Milling Wolf. And summoning is like him putting his hand away. Like, that's not that good. And then summoning Christia, best feeling in the format. Like, honestly, like there's only thing else that gives me a dopamine rush higher than resolving Christia is resolving Black Whirlwind. Like, that's the only thing. Like, Whirlwind, resolve, and me searching my deck is like the only other thing that gives me a dopamine rush as high as Christia. But yeah, that deck, it just has a really good matchup spread against the Hero Frog deck for obvious reasons. Christia just ruins them, right? Like, they can't bring back Treeborn Frog. You can't beat over it with a Junk Synchron like we were talking about earlier.
Yep.
She's a
little too big. Unless you have a Dishonest in your hand.
Yeah.
Then maybe you can do it.
What else is there? So, Zombies, I think it just invalidates that deck completely. Dragon Turbo is a joke to that deck. Glabbeast is a hard matchup because they play a lot of traps. And when you're not main decking heavy Cold Wave Trunade, it really does suck. But what I will say is that you can steal game 1 if you just start to resolve your boss monsters. Like, if you just find a way to get through, or if they just don't draw a lot of traps, that's one thing. And if you can just get through them and establish a boss monster, it's also just game that way. So you can win. And then games 2 and 3, you side in all your ignorant back row hate, and Glabbeasts are just still realizing that they're Glabbeasts. Blackwing matchup, I haven't played enough where I can definitively say which one really wins, but in my head, the Blackwing deck has a slight edge because it's just a little bit more consistent. And like, Christia isn't that crazy against Blackwings because Blackwings is already playing Royal Oppression. So it's already expecting that it won't really be special summoning too much, or that it needs to, I should say, because Kalut is a hell of a card. But there are
Gale.
But there are certain games that can absolutely be, this was not a real game. You did something like to invalidate me, like you had Oppression or a Whirlwind, and it was just too much, too fast. Or the other person opened up Solar Recharge and Charge or whatever, and they invalidate the Blackwing deck, and it's like, that is way too fast for what I'm trying to do over here. So I can see that being a very volatile matchup, because that deck is just, the Lightsworn Fairy deck is just volatile anyway, but in the scariest way, which is why I do not want to play against it in a tournament. And yeah, that's kind of how I feel about where Edison format is. Before we get out of here, the other things I wanted to quickly touch on is like tech choices that I've been seeing. So Nobleman of Extermination kind of came mid-year. Like, they call it Swedish Blackwings, and I really like that. And I also saw Bait Doll. Bait Doll's cute too, because I think in the Blackwing mirror match, like if you side in Bait Doll and they have an Icarus attack set, it forces the activation of the trap. So they'll be forced to literally Icarus attack your Bait Doll, because they can target Bait Doll with it. So they'll be forced to tribute their monster, target your bait dial and their other card if that's the first card you play, because you don't have anything else. You're just like, play bait dial, target your back row. And if they have Icarus, they have to like pop their cards, and your bait dial is like theoretically what could happen. And so that's really, really fucking good. So I thought that was cute. Nobleman of Extermination is really cool because it's faster than Dust Tornado. And oftentimes, people aren't signing continuous cards against Blackwings. So if you don't know, Nobleman of Extermination, if I flip the card, right? Like, so if I activate Master Restrict Chain to Nobleman of Extermination, it won't banish it. It won't destroy it. It actually just stays. So Nobleman of Extermination sucks against continuous cards. The good thing is, though, like, a lot of times people don't side cards against Blackwings or even play cards against Blackwings that can just get flip face up like that to invalidate Nobleman of Extermination. So what ends up happening is most people just have like Bottomless Trap Hole, D-Prison, stuff like that. And when you go Nobleman of Extermination, it's just going to hit those cards. Or, you know, Starlight Road, stuff like that. So Nobleman of Extermination is really good in the Blackwing deck, either remaining it or siding it. It really helps against bullshit matchups like Glad Beast and Hero Beat and Hero Stun and all these trap heavy decks. Like, it just really, really helps against those decks. Like I said, Consecrated Light, it's already in the side deck of every deck, so that's like some innovation that's happening. And I really like the idea of Jar Greed / Legacy Yagarasu, because Edison format got to a point where a lot of people that were playing the Swedish Blackwing deck and they were playing Nobleman of Exterminations and stuff. And where that card sucks is when people just chain something like Legacy Yagarasu / Jar Greed to it and get a free +1. So it's so cool how, again, this is that cyclical format, that circular format, because people were playing Triple D Prison and Bottomless Trap Holes and all these traps, people started playing Nobleman of Extermination. Then because Nobleman of Extermination got so popular, and it's also in like the best deck, people said, okay, well, what can I chain to that card to make it not good? And Jar Greed is like what came to mind. So now people are playing that. And so then it becomes like, okay, well, now Nobleman of Extermination kind of sucks again. So let people play the Legacy Yagarasus. You could have that face down while I'm summoning a shore and beating your face in. And it's just kind of crazy, you know, there we go again. It's like the circular thing. So they'll start to put in D-Prison again because they're tired of getting beat on. And then it goes back to like, oh, well, people playing D-Prison, I'm going to play Nobleman of Extermination.
And if that continues, what's really cool about that is like what could happen even if not any more innovation comes other than what we've already talked about. What'll happen is like you'll have a tournament where everybody's playing like fucking Extermination and Jar of Greed, but then the good players will look back like, okay, what was being played at the last tournament? And then you're going to adjust for the next tournament. And then so you're even if it's just swapping out what traps and counter traps you're fucking playing, you know what I mean? Like that's going to change your decks every other tournament, and just being up to date on that. Like a card like Bait Doll, it's interesting. That's a card that I think most Yu-Gi-Oh players could look at and be like, this card sucks because like who knows what the fuck you're playing against, right? Yeah. But when the format becomes more refined, you're like, oh, this card's really good. But then it's like, the bad players come in when they just like, now they're always playing Bait Doll, and it's like, all right, well, that card's not relevant in this tournament. It kind of got phased out, and it's just shit like that, like cards being good and bad without the card pool changing, because players are making meta choices to like keep trying to stay ahead of everybody else for each upcoming tournament. Like that shit's always really awesome to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the format has just gotten to a place that I didn't expect it to. Like I basically started to recoil from the format a bit. I started to just say, all right, I think it's kind of solved. Like I'm seeing way too much Blackwing, and my locals started to die out. Like a lot of people who used to come there every week just stopped coming because they were kind of getting fatigued as well. Just like getting bored with the format. It did become stale. And then out of nowhere, it just revitalized itself. And I'm so happy that happened, because now I'm like, all right, let's get back in the lab. Let's get back into testing. Let's get back into it. Then I'm seeing these tournaments being announced all over the country where there are real prizes being given out. Like a PS5 is a pretty fucking cool prize to have for a tournament. And that's only first place. Like second place and down to 8th place is like a lot of product as well. Like all types of, good prizes. So I'm happy that that type of thing is happening. And I just want Edison format to keep thriving. Like I used to have some pretty big gripes with the format and stuff like that, but I just feel like lately I've been feeling pretty good about it. And that is a good thing, because it honestly covers a lot of my time. Also, we got to do the Master and the Pupil series, and we're continuing to do that. And that's really fun. Like I've been having a lot of fun. Some of the games are just so funny. And if you're not already on our Patreon, please check it out, because Master of the Pupil is kind of cracked. Like if you want to hear me really, really rage or just like have some really frustrating moments, I run into some bullshit on Dueling Book, okay? I ran into a guy that literally tried to tell me that because he had Arcus in the graveyard, that I couldn't target any of his fucking Lightsworn monsters anywhere.
What?
I tried to go Lumina, discard a card, bring back Arcus, and he was like, "You can't target Arcus." He says Lightsworn monsters can't be targeted. I was like, "Yeah, but he's in the graveyard." And he was like, "Yeah, but he says you can't target." And we went back and forth for like literally 10 minutes.
It was a long time. It was a long time.
That's like saying,
yeah.
That's like if I get if I do trap dust shoot, he's in my hand, and I go, all right, put Arcus back in your deck, and he's like, you can't. You can't put Arcus back on my deck with trap dust shoot.
Yeah, it was so wild. I was like, bro, the effect doesn't apply while it's in the graveyard. I was like, you realize you're basically saying that Arcus is the best monster in the game, right? Like, if he went to the graveyard and just had that effect applying to the game, you know how insane that would be? Like, oh, I know that Arcus at any point, guess my Lightsworns can't be targeted for the rest of the fucking game. Like, you can't Crow me, you can't brain control me, you can't mind control me, you can't Raikou any of my guys, you can't Caius me. I was like, you realize what you're saying?
You know what's also so weird about that? I feel like people that say that have to be cheating intentionally. And the reason why I say that is, no, because, and I could be wrong, but I feel like there's different groups of people. And if you're of the group of people that is even playing on Dueling Book anyway, like, you know what Yu-Gi-Oh is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
that's true. That's true, actually, because Dueling Book is so specific.
Yeah, like, if you got to the point where you're playing on Dueling Book, like, it's like Reddit, right? Like, the Reddit community for a game is not the game's community as a whole. The Reddit community is usually a more focused community, right? Yes. Like, if you look at the Monster Hunter Reddit, that is not the majority of Monster Hunter players are not that Reddit, right? It's a very specific community. So, like, if you're on Dueling Book, you're part of a community that, like, for the most part, I think kind of knows the concepts of Yu-Gi-Oh to some degree. Like, I don't feel like you're just a random that goes to your, I don't know. I just feel like it's a specific thing. Like, it's,
you do bring up a good point about that, which I never really considered too much about. The people who are on Dueling Book technically should be a little bit more competent because you had to seek Dueling Book out.
Yeah.
Like you had to seek that shit out. But you'd be surprised at, well, you probably wouldn't be.
Yeah.
But the number of just insane people I encounter, me and Stango encounter on Dueling Book, it's wild every day. Every day I just think that it can't get worse, and then it does. So hopefully, eventually, somebody will come out with a better platform for Yu-Gi-Oh to play Edison format. That would be great. I'd also be open to Dueling Book having an Edison like rated section.
They need a ladder. I know they said, like, they went out of their way to say they're not adding a ladder for Edison, which I think is so hateful because, like, they have a ladder for GOAT, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and that's
like, I don't know why you wouldn't add a ladder for Edison. Like,
sorry. Like,
this is the most popular format right now. Edison, I'm not going to add a ladder for it.
Yes, like, that is just weird to me. I'm hoping that Dueling Book changes their tune on that because that does not make sense. Edison is way more popular than GOATs now. This is proven in person and tournaments, and it's just a much more popular format. I think it's time that it gets a rated, and that will help to honestly alleviate a lot of the bullshit that we encounter, because eventually it'll get to a point where, like, my rating is so high that I'll only be encountering theoretically better people, and it'll make for better content, because we just play randoms. And, like, yeah, Hydro Pump offered me the idea of going into the, like, format library, or Edison format, Discord, and, like, requesting to play games against people on there and all that stuff. And I was like, man, honestly, we be playing games at random times, and I'm not trying to wait for anybody. Like, I'm not here for that.
Yeah.
But it also, what's funny about it also is that, like, Dueling Book is entertaining. And I feel like for recording videos, it's actually quite entertaining to just run into these scenarios sometimes because they don't have.
Oh, yeah. Dude, look what you just said. Like, if you're just by yourself in your room, and you're not on Discord and you fucking deal with that Arcus argument, that's infuriating. But if you're on a Discord call, and especially if you're recording a video, like, that's content. Like, that's amazing.
And immediately I was like, you realize you're saying that Arcus is the best monster in Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Like, that means that Lightsworn monsters literally can never be targeted for the rest of the game, bro. How you even
know what you gotta do, though? You know what you gotta say to these people? You gotta be like, you realize you're being recorded, right? Like, this is going on YouTube. Like, you gotta tell them. Like, you gotta
not tell them we live, baby. Yeah.
You gotta tell them, like, you realize your foolishness is going to be on YouTube. Like, you know that, right? You realize you're putting this on YouTube. Like, I just want you to know. I just want to make sure you know.
I might start running that. I like that. I like that a lot. You know this is being recorded, right?
Smile for the camera.
That might alleviate so much because the shit I go through is unreal. All right. Well, I'm ready to wrap this episode up. You guys, if you have anything else to add, feel free to speak. But
no, nothing much. It's been a good year of learning for me and Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah.
I was definitely right there with Frazier where Edison was getting a little stale. I was definitely getting checked out of it, but it's really nice that it came around because I've been really enjoying myself learning the game and playing. It's been real good stuff.
Yeah, this is really like I said, it really has revitalized my feelings towards the format and towards Yu-Gi-Oh! And the fact that people are out there innovating. Like, I am not the best innovator in the world, so I'm really happy that other people are doing that shit and making it fun, because all the innovation just makes it fun. I imagine in Melee, AMSA has inspired an entire new generation of Yoshi players now, because they have seen Yoshi go to the top of the mountain, beat Mango, beat Zane, beat all of the absolute cracked best players who have been the best players for years. And now you have an actual fucking Yoshi main winning super majors. Like, that is a real thing that happened more than once last year. Like, that is actually crazy that a super major or any tournament, honestly, any tournament being won by Yoshi.
Love that so much. Because I get so many arguments with people because people say like Melee is soft, and I'm like, you just don't understand. You don't understand competitive games.
Yeah. So think about like, he's inspiring a new class of Yoshis, and that may sound like a meme, but those people will help to push the Yoshi meta, right? Like, there are because who's to say that AMSA is actually and will forever always be the best Yoshi player ever, right? So like, innovation for Yoshi can continue by new people that take up the mantle after he's done. For example, at one point, Mewtwo King was the best Marth, right? And that was just the world we lived in. Mewtwo King was by far the best Marth, way better than Ken. But there was a time when people thought that Ken was as far as it would go. And then it became Mewtwo King. And then there was a time when people thought that Mewtwo King was as far as it would go. And look at Zane. So I'm saying all that to say, it's really cool that people innovate and change the game and change the format up in a locked format like Edison, because then it inspires people to keep innovating and creating and changing it and just making things fresh and new and cool.
Yep.
And that's kind of putting a bow on this whole episode. All right, well, before we get out of here, don't forget, if you have a listener letter, if you want to talk to us about anything and have us discuss it on this podcast, you can write into IMNerdpodcast at gmail.com, and we will read your letter aloud on the show. Also, I have been including a clickable link to our Patreon in each episode's description. So I think on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, you should be able to like actually click the link to get to our Patreon if you're unaware of like what that is, because some people might not know what Patreon actually is. I didn't know what it was until like 2 years ago. So but Patreon is a platform where you can just support us and you actually unlock perks. So check out those perks, like our Discord server. We have video versions of the podcast, which Kenny has uploaded literally every video version of the podcast that we've ever done at this point. Like, we're completely caught up on there. We also drop episodes that are only on Patreon. They're nowhere else. Like, those episodes are literally Patreon exclusive, and we do one of those every single month. We also have other perks where we do like a deck doctor or deck malpractice, where either I or Kenny can like literally edit your deck. I love that he said that the first time I brought up that. So I've always been saying this deck doctor or deck malpractice.
Hey man, listen, if you want to get your deck ruined, I'll send it to me. I got you.
Yeah, but if you want it to be like actually edit it and you want to have me discuss it with you or whatever, we can do a deck doctor thing, and that's one of the tiers. And also, probably one of the best perks is that we can do a recorded duel, which I consider a shadow game, where we can play each other on Dueling Book and Edison format, and that'll get uploaded to our YouTube channel. And so yeah, those are some of the perks. There's other perks too, like shout outs on every episode, and that's brings me to what I'm about to do right now. There are 44 of you. I am going hoarse right now. I've been talking a lot today, and I'm going to name all 44 of our current patrons. Thank you guys so fucking much for just supporting the podcast. The fact that in the last like month, we've added over 10 people to the Patreon is wild. And I'm just really happy to see all the support. And I'm hoping that you guys are enjoying like everything that we're putting up there between the videos and the Master and the Pupil and the 2 Masters and all these other series and stuff that we're doing. And we have more rants. If you guys are interested in like, there are times when we just rant and it's pretty much just our conversations. If you want that type of stuff to be recorded and uploaded too, we could do that as well. We just have conversations all the time that definitely could be recorded. But yeah, anyways, shout out to Connie, Austin, Leon, Quest, Garen, Xavier, Hylian, Dimitri, Alexander Brissett, Vinny Casello, Giovanni Avalos, Alex Flamer, Henri Reynolds, CJ, WK-1, Dan Varable, Personal Home, Dallas Fernaris, Estat Akuma, Mitchell Nels, Midwest Gaming, Dimitri Safirdas, Vince Marquette, Dallas Bailey, Roz Weiss, Nick Stango, Hansel, our 2-time national champion, Vincent Zen, Sarah Maria, Sunny Top Cup Podcast, Alex Ahern, Philip Campa, Jalen Haskins, Arali Melfi Slump, Kang Petty, Chris Lynn, Jeff Luang, Blake Jeffrey Smith, Connor LK, MSW 2389, Edison Club, Kyle Patelho, Brandon Moore, and Sugal. Thank you guys again. We really appreciate it. And as I always say, do the things that make you happy. We will catch you in the next one.